This is the vPub. I know that some of you are coming on just to kind of consume some nice whiskey content, and you've probably looked at the time duration of this video, and it's maybe freaked you out a bit. It's not typical YouTube content. It's certainly not short form content. It's slightly different here. There's lots of fantastic short form whiskey content out there on YouTube, just the same as there's any good quality content out there on YouTube in longer form style and reviews and things like that as well. But the vPub is a wee bit different. If this is your first time here tonight, it's not intended to be just quick grab and go content. It's meant to give us a wee pocket of time, a little bit of sacrosanct, sacred time that we can sit down with a dram, take time out from all the busy, all the crazy, relax for a little bit around whiskey. The V in the vPub literally stands for V for virtual, and that's exactly what we're trying to do here tonight. So if it's 2 hours tonight, or perhaps 3 hours, whatever it is, we just let it run. I'll see you all in a second. Hello, whiskey folk. Hello, everybody. I hope you're all doing very well. Welcome to the vPub. Yes, as I said at the start there, I just wanted to kind of get that out there. Sometimes people are coming on and saying, oh, the vPub, I never really understood it. I just had a conversation with somebody just in the last few days over direct communication. And they talked about how the vPub just wasn't for them because it just was so long. It was almost intimidating when they saw how long it ran for. But now they're in and they love it and they really look forward to it every week because it is that kind of pocket of time and it's a different way to consume content on YouTube. I understand that, but it's whiskey, and whiskey teaches us, doesn't it, to slow down, hopefully, if you're doing it right. But I need to make an apology because I don't know how many weeks I owe you, but it must go back to at least Rassie or perhaps even the week before Rassie. During the last few weeks of really, really quite super busy times, I've struggled to get in and chop the vPub up into segments for you and add little chapter markers and timestamps and let you know where I'm talking about what things to help you skip through. I know a lot of you have noticed that that's not been happening, and I apologise that I'm delinquent. Hopefully tomorrow I'll get a chance to catch up, and I'll start with this one. So hopefully if you're watching this on replay from Friday onwards, you've got some timestamps and you can skip through the session tonight to the bits that you find most interesting. Anyway, welcome everybody. I hope you're all doing very, very well. As you know, tonight is a guest session again. Absolutely loved hanging out with Roddy last week. It's always brilliant fun to have him around. I know that you guys enjoyed it too. And I've got somebody joining me later tonight, Scott Adamson from Tomatin, who I should have counted actually how many times Scott's been on, because I know that he has been on quite a few times over the 5 or 6 years of the vPub. But it's always brilliant to have him on again. And specifically tonight, I hope that with a much more relaxed kind of background topic and things, you can get a sense just how much of a whiskey enthusiast, how impassioned Scott actually is as he kind of takes us through his journey, going through the what the industry drinks type categories tonight. I'm looking forward to that. But in the meantime, of course, I'm going to do what I always do. I'm going to jump in to the lounge and welcome some of you beautiful whiskey folk and dedicated barflies. I'll be looking for the oranges, I always do. I hope you're all doing very, very well. It's fantastic to see you all. Over 200 of you in already, and we've only just opened the doors. I really appreciate the support. I love it. A quick mention, if anybody does buy a super chat tonight, please take care. You might have noticed last week that one of my long-term friends, one of our long-term barflies, bought a super chat last week, and through a typo, sent far more more than he intended to. So I had to get in touch with him straight away. He got in touch with me as well. We had a chat about it. Don't worry, he's gonna be reunited with his money. But it's tricky and it's messy, and YouTube are kind of black and white about these kind of things, that it's non-refundable and stuff, and it's annoying and frustrating. So if you do buy a super chat, if you're using the slider or if you're typing it in, please just take a beat, take a moment to make sure that the money that you're putting in is what you intend to do. It's the first time it's ever happened in 6 years, and hopefully it'll be the last time too, but it's getting sorted out. Anyway, welcome everyone. Chris Pollack is saying good evening, Roy. Good to see you. And Chris, Julian Rickman is here saying evening, Roy, and evening, Barflies. Good to see Scott back in the vPub. Such a great whiskey man. I'm glad that you're looking forward to it, Julian. I am too. Luna Aaron is saying, oh, just in time. Hello, lovely Barflies, and hello, Roy. Good to welcome you in, Luna. I hope you're doing very well. Jerry Miller is saying good evening, Roy. Good to have you, Jerry. I know you're planning a trip to Scotland very soon. Mike Molasses is here, of course. Good to see you, Mike, and Whiskey Weekend Dram. That's Harrow. Fantastic, Harrow. Good to see you. Roman is here as well. Roman, I hope you're keeping well, my friend. Good to see you in, along with Ryan McCleve and Greg's Whiskey Guide. Good to see you both. Jimmy Jazz, Rob Halford is here as well, along with Justin Wan. Good evening, my friend. Now, Justin, I think you and I, with any luck, wind blowing in the right direction and everything aligned, we need to meet up while you're here. I have a package here for you collected today. So we need to find a way to hook up at the weekend. I hope our plans work out, my friend. It would be a pleasure to welcome you here while you're in Glasgow. Petehead is saying, evening, Roy. Thanks for the early explanation. So it will be over 3 hours, of course. Well, I don't think it's been over 3 hours for a long time, Frank. Has it? Maybe it has. But it's certainly regularly running over 2 hours. So that old kind of thing that we used to say, let's try and keep it under 2 hours tonight. So many of you have come back and saying, we don't care. We don't care. If it runs too late, we just go to bed and we pick the rest up the next day. If we're watching it on the replay anyway, we cut it up into chunks. Don't just do the thing, let it run. You know, and I think that there's a lot of sense in that. Let's not choke things or thwart things or cut them or rush them or anything. Just let it run. When we've finished, we've finished. Dave Cummins is in tonight. My friend, I was thinking of you very, very recently. I just celebrated a birthday. And of course, when I celebrate my birthday, I think about you and your birthday too. I hope you're doing well, Dave. And it's nice to welcome you back in the lounge, my friend. I hope you're keeping well. Fernando's saying good evening, Roy. Good to see you, Fernando. And Bruno Martins is saying good evening. Glad to be here once again. And thank you for this whiskey content. Bruno, it's always a pleasure to welcome you and my friend. I know that you're over in Portugal, aren't you? Good to have you, Bruno, always. Helswid is here. Helen, so good to see you. She's saying good evening, Roy. Helen, you and I, we were supposed to meet up last week and now this week, and it's down to me again, Helen. Thanks for your patience, always. It will happen. It will happen. Gerben is here from the Netherlands. He's saying, good evening, Roy. Good evening, Gerben. I know you're planning retirement. A little bird told me that you're building up to retirement imminently, my friend. It's nice to welcome you in the vPub, buddy, and it was good to see you in Limburg. Gav's Drams is here. Hello, Roy. Good to see you, Gav. Hope you're keeping well. Gav's Drams, he's putting out great content on YouTube as well. He's doing his own channel over at Gav's Drams, like no other content out there as well. Buying his own whiskey, sharing his own thoughts, exactly as it should be. Good to see you, Gav. Carlos San Diego is here saying good evening, Roy. The glass toppers are great. Thank you. Fantastic, Carlos. I'm glad that they've eventually made it all the way out to you as well, and I'm glad that you've got them safely. And of course, Jimmy Legg is in. Fantastic, Jimmy, saying very few people understand anything Aquavitae. Explaining rarely helps. Always the cynicism, tongue-in-cheek cynicism from Jimmy Legg. It's brilliant to have you in, buddy. Ian Bruce is saying, in Barflies, good evening to you all. By the way, thanks Ian, thanks very much. As Jimmy Legg is in tonight, and I hope I have mentioned it before, but the 30th of September in Glasgow is booked. We have the agreement of the Bon Accord that we can reserve a space in the Bon Accord and all get together. And I'm not sure whether we're calling it Jimmy Fest or Leg Fest. I think if we call it Leg Fest, I think that sounds like something completely different altogether. So I'm kind of more keen to go with Jimmy Fest. Now, of course, it would have been instantly Jimmy Fest if Jim Jensen was able to come across and make it as well, but I think he's struggling for the 30th of September. But so many of you are not struggling. So many of you are coming to Glasgow for that weekend. Saturday, the 30th of September. Save the date, put it in your diary. If you can make it to Glasgow for 30th of September, we will be sharing drams in the Bon Accord with Jimmy Legg and lots of other beautiful whiskey folk and dedicated barflies as well. My friend Ebhead is here. Rolfie, so good to see you in, buddy. It's always brilliant to see you. Blackfen is here too. So good to see you, Conrad, my friend. And Ian Bruce is, I think I mentioned, I just caught you, Ian, just as that jumped there as well. Sorry, I'll try and bring it back. Ryan Sutherland is saying good evening, everyone. Hey, Roy. And Gordon Fraser is saying good evening, Roy. Hope you are keeping well. Gordon, I am, buddy. I hope you, Ryan, Ian, and everybody else is too. Greg's Whiskey Guide is saying, Tell them there is always the replay, like I did for last week. Yeah, absolutely, Greg. And especially, you know, the vPub, since the very, very first live vPub that there was, back in 2017, it went out at 10:15 at night, and it's just been that time. And the reason I went out late at night is because so much of, you know, the internet does not see borders. And I'm trying to pitch it at a time that I can cover as much of the audience as possible. So yes, it's late for Europeans, I understand that, but it's also early for North America. So it's either a brilliant time or a really terrible time. Regardless, it is what it is, and it's stayed there. So many of you pick it up on the replay. So I'm grateful for everybody that joins in live, and I'm very, very grateful to people that pick it up on the replay too. Mikey Hayes here. So good to see you, Mikey. I hope you're keeping well, my friend. It's wonderful to see you. And Rick Johnson saying good afternoon from San Francisco, Roy, and fellow barflies. Rick, it's wonderful to have you, buddy. Cheers. Somebody's bought me a dram. Let's catch that before I miss it. Dan Thompson, he's saying, evening, Roy. Hope you're well. I'm off to Isla for the first time on Monday. Oh, my goodness, for a week. Any advice? Take your time, Dan. You're going there for a week. There's going to be plenty of time to do everything that you want to do whiskey-wise. Just slow down, marinade in the space and the place, take walks, do the things that are non-whiskey related as well, take hikes, go to the beach, do whatever you can, just soak it all in, take your time. Book good tours. Please, I hope you've booked your tours already. It's brutal right now, the demand for the tours. And it's not just the demand for the tours, it's the lack of staff in a lot of the places, and hospitality in general right now in Scotland. We're still struggling a bit. So please make sure that your meals, your dinners, your nights out, whatever it is you're going to do are booked. Make sure that your whiskey tours are booked in advance if you possibly can, and slow down. If you can do a distillery or two a day at the most, that's probably the right cadence, in my opinion. When you start to squeeze in 3 and 4, you can do it, but it's just kind of ticking boxes then. But you might be going with folk that are not whiskey folk as well, so you might need to really slow it down. Dan, I hope you have a brilliant time while you're over there. We want to hear all about it, and thanks for the dram. Cheers, buddy. Des is here saying, good evening, Roy. Good to see you. And Alex the Hogsheads is saying, evening, Roy. Going to have to catch this one on the replay. The Aurora tonight is supposed to be good here in Rassy, so heading out. I hope the light bar made it back to you. The light bar made it back to me. It's sitting over there. Graham Young brought it all the way back from Rassy. Thank you very much, Alex. I left my light bar went over in Rassy, and Alex passed it to Graham Young, who brought it back to me, and it's sitting over there just waiting to be charged up. If you are able to see the Aurora tonight, that would be fantastic, Alex. Amazing. You might remember, anybody that will watch the broadcast from Rassy, Alex was sitting just over our shoulder and the stools behind for the quiz at the end. Great to have you in, buddy. Always great to have you around. So yes, tonight, not much housekeeping. I probably do have some housekeeping to do, but it's not on my mind right now, and I'm not sure. I want to get on and welcome in my guest for this evening. I suppose I need to make a something of an apology, because he's the second guest I have to do this theme of what the industry drinks. About a year ago, you might remember Inver House, Stuart Baxter, from Inver House, joined us for the first session of this. I did intend to do more than kind of 1 or 2 a year, but it's just kind of, you know, we don't force anything. When it's good to go, it's good to go. But my guest tonight, Scott Adamson, should have been the first. Why? Because he's been the first for absolutely everything else. He was the first to step forward and join the YouTube space on a live stream generally, back when it was a maverick unknown thing, way back as early as, I think it was about 2016, I first saw Scott appear on the Scotch Test Dummies live stream. He was the first to join me on my channel as well. He was the first to participate in a blind challenge. He was the first to step forward and drink a whiskey that was not of his own portfolio live on air, and immediately demonstrate to everyone that he was in it for the whiskey and not just his own whiskies. He was the first to work together with me in order to, we brought the first ever lockdown whiskey festival together back in 2020. Remember those days? And he was also the first to welcome me and help me host the very first on location vPub live. So it's an absolute. Just before I welcome him in, I'll grab these 2 super chats that's just appeared from Mark Goins. My friend Mark Goins, fantastic. He's bought me a dram to say to buy Jimmy a dram at Jimmy Fest. That means you're not coming back over for it, Mark, are you? Mark managed to join me with his buddies at Rassie a few weeks ago. I met him also while he was here in Glasgow, and it was an absolute privilege. I often point Mark out because he's the guy that provided this fantastic, huge hardwood vPub compass logo that sits over my shoulder. Nice to have you in, Mark, always. And also a dram from my buddy from California, Eric Waite is in. Hello from the Wizard Academy in Austin, Texas. So he's not in California right now. He's down in Austin, Texas, down at the Wizard Academy. The Wizard Academy is also the campus that hosts the Whiskey Tribe and the Whiskey Vault with Daniel and Rex. Eric, I'm sure you're having a brilliant time. Say hello to everyone for me. And thanks for the dram. Cheers, buddy. And thanks to Mark too. So yes, my guest tonight has been the first for everything. So I'll welcome in just now. I'll say, how are you doing? Scott Adamson. Nice to have you. I will apologise. You should have been the first for this gig as well, but you were busy last year. I don't know what happened. It's just Stuart was about, and we developed this idea that we could have this what the industry drinks type session.
Listen, listen, it's nice to have a blueprint for a change, you know. This time I was able to watch someone else do it first.
That is a very good point. That's a good point. So you're able to look and say, oh, okay, I know what that is, whereas every time before you've been the first. But I'm genuine about that. I think that I did not see anybody, as far as I'm aware, from the industry stepping forward to these kind of hobbyist type YouTube channels that started to pop up about 10 years or so ago with the Scottish Test Dummies and the like. But remember, you and your colleague Scott at that time, the both of you stepping forward and having great fun joining that stream and giving people great insight into whiskey production and whiskey dynamics and things. It was one of those lights on moments for me to see the two of you there. It made me very, very excited about the future of it all.
Yeah.
I also think you were the first industry bod to come onto the vPub back before it was even called the vPub, probably.
I think
way
so.
Back in 2016, 2018, I think we guessed it might have been.
Yeah, But back when this room that I'm in right now was red, if people go back and watch that episode, I'm in this room, but it was a totally different color and there was a wall here. So,
you said red. I thought you said wrecked. I don't remember that.
That too.
That too. I think you're absolutely right. You had a dark red background. Yeah. It was a few years ago. You haven't changed a bit. Actually,
that's
you're looking every bit as fresh-faced as you always did, and you're still very much in love with the role, in love with whiskey, aren't you?
Yeah, absolutely. I would.
You're not ever offended by me referring to you as a whiskey geek, are you?
No, not in the slightest. I would probably be the first person to raise my hand and call myself a whiskey geek. So, I think it's a good thing, and I think everyone who is interested in something should be quite proud of being recognised for that.
Aye. There was a time when it was a negative thing to suggest someone's a geek, but I think context is everything, of course. But I think in a context that we are talking about it right now, we hope that we cause nobody offence. We mean it in a very positive way. Yeah. I'll recall a wee story of the first time I ever met you face to face. It was at the Glasgow Whisky Festival. And that's crazy at the Glasgow Whisky Festival. It's so busy. You'd have been so busy. But you reached out. You wouldn't have recognised me at all from anyone, I don't think. But we connected straight away. We had this super quick chat. By the time I left that, it was only maybe a 5-minute exchange, I think, that we had. I had already decided that I'd love to get you to join me in the vPub. Would you be up for it? And you were like, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And the reason that I realized that I wanted you on is because what I'd witnessed from you online came across in person. We could have easily stood there for an hour talking if you didn't have all the other folk to look after and service at the festival, right? Because have you tried? Have you done? Did you hear about this? It just everything you say immediately inspires another direction of conversation around whiskey. It was incredible. And that's what kind of filled me with this idea that you're not just doing it as a brand ambassador, Scott. That's what you were back then, a brand ambassador, soon to be global brand ambassador. And now you've moved on again. We'll talk about that.
Yeah.
But I could tell that this was more than just a job to you, even back then, right?
Yeah, that's right. I think what's even funnier about that now is that anybody who goes to Glasgow Whisky Festival now will find it far easier to come and speak to me than they will to go and speak to you, because you cannot move at that place anymore. You are, if people didn't recognize you then, they know you now. You and
Aye.
Ralphie holding court for the whole show.
Yeah, but it's always about people, isn't it? We go there with the excuse is the whiskey, the catalyst is the whiskey, but you get there and all you want to do is hang out and talk to the folk. And you know, it's the whiskey is just this fabulous catalyst for that. It's amazing. And especially the afternoon session, it's a very busy thing. Nick Tilling has bought us a wee dram, Scott. He says, "Evening, Roy et al. A long-time Patreon and enjoyer of all things Aquavitae. First time on live chat, as Thursday is usually a school night. Cheers, folk." Well, here's to Nick Tilling not having a school night and being able to join us live for a change. And thank you for the dram, Nick. Nice to have you in, buddy, and it's nice to be able to welcome you. Cheers. Well, we get together and we did do all of those things together. A lot of them were firsts. Coming up to the distillery and doing the first on location vPub was superb, Scott. An absolute privilege. We got a real buzz out of the 2020 lockdown festival. That was great fun as well. So much so we did another one later in the year for charity, right? And you know, this kind of open, candid demeanor that you have, this kind of candor, this you know, this attitude where nothing phases you. There's nothing that you feel like you can't talk about. Do you feel that confidence has come from? Do you feel any sense that you are in a dream job and it's just easy to talk about, or is it just that you're in a dream job working for a good company? Is you?
I think it's a bit of both. I think you know, there might be some companies out there where you have this job and it is the dream job, but maybe you're not allowed to speak quite as freely. But at Tomatin, we've always had this kind of honest, approachable nature to us. You can have open conversations with anyone in the business. So I'm by no means the only person at Tomatin that you can have a conversation like this with. I'm just very fortunate enough to be the person in the role that's allowed to have these conversations more frequently. So yeah, it's the dream job for the dream company, and it just allows us to be very open. And you know, as we say, there's no conversation off limits. I think the very first vPub that I was on, Roy, we set out with the intention of having a challenging conversation. I know you were in some ways reluctant to have someone on from the industry because at that stage you didn't want it to seem like it could be an advert or anything. So we set out with this conversation about why are things chill filtered? Why is there colouring? Why is pricing going up? And I think from that, it's nice to have those conversations sometimes, because sometimes the industry does need to be able to not necessarily clap back, but be able to answer some questions and feel like that we're listening to consumers.
I think you're spot on. I think you've hit the nail right in the head. I've got a theory about that, but before I start spewing my theory about that very thing, let's get a dram in the glass. I've poured something as a nod to you over my shoulder. Actually, I'll just go to full screen for a second so that I've actually dug out all the Scott Adamson whiskies I have. So I've got an old Tomatin here. I've got some distillery handfills over there. I've got some Cù Bòcans in between. So I'll dip into those throughout tonight because one of us has to be drinking Tomatin products, right? But in the glass, I've actually got a whiskey that I believe you made. This is the Decades 2.
Yeah, Decades 2. That's one that I was very lucky to be involved with Graham Yunson working on this one. We worked on it together quite a lot. So one of the first kind of real examples of seeing Graham make an incredible whiskey there. And, you know, there was a day when he said, I remember, and then we might have talked about this before. So this has got whiskey from the last 50 years in it, old stuff and young stuff, and different cask types. And I remember we tasted the vatting sample and it was a little bit bitter, more bitter than we expected. And just being with Graham when he was able to say, you know, I think that's because there's a bit too much of the 2009 in here, which was in French oak casks, and we know those to be quite tannic. And he just said, go and grab 2 more from 1976 and 3 more from 1995. I was like, you're throwing in 2 more 45-year-old whiskies and the casks of 45-year-old whiskey and 3 more casks of 30-year-old whiskey just to get it right, you know. And
Well, you were committed by that time, right? You were
yeah,
absolutely committed by that time.
yeah,
And I think that's kind of wonderful to consider, because there's a lot of cynicism when an honest statement product. I remember trying this when I was up in Tomatin with you in the Highlands, and I tried it while I was live, and there's a lot of cynicism with an honest statement because, you know, there's a suggestion, oh yes, it's from over the 50 years, it's from 5 decades of tomatin producing. And I know the Scotch Whisky Association are very careful about how you label such a product so that you can't missell it or anything like that. But to hear the story like that, you already had that really old stock in the vatting, and you added, because we're not talking about another 2 bottles and another bottle. We're talking casks of 45-year-old and 1990s product. I have to be honest, I remember when I first opened this, I thought, oh, this is good whiskey. It wasn't until I came up to Tomatin and sat with you and got a chance to, you know, sip it there at Tomatin. Of course, that's going to make a difference. But also to hear the effort and the work that went into it, and to appreciate what was in the glass in front of me. Amazing stuff. What are you going to put in your glass? The first category tonight, and I should have had my subtitles up, but I didn't prepare them. It's okay. There's 5 categories, much the same we did a year ago with Stuart Baxter. And the first one is the Permashelf offering. So what I'm looking for there, Scott, is something that you would probably always love to have on the shelf. And that's because it's one you love to drink, or it's one you love to share. It's affordable. There's no anxiety to drinking it. You know that it's going to be more or less available. That's what defines a Permashelf bottling. What have you chosen? Now, I have no idea what your whiskies are. So, and by the way, let me say at the outset, you're absolutely welcome to pour Tomatin whiskies, Cù Bòcans, anything from your own portfolio, or go anywhere on the whiskey map whatsoever. There is no, you don't come onto the vPub with any conditions, and I'm not going to lay them down to you now. We're past that point. It's all about trust, buddy. So what have you decided to bring along for your Permashelf offering?
I'll start by saying what I'm going to do is I'm going to show a Tomatin whiskey for 4 of the 5 categories, but I'm not going to be drinking that. I'm going to pour something else, because I'm sitting with 11 whiskies on front of me to get into 5 categories. It's going to be a difficult job.
We can all relate.
Yeah.
We can all relate.
So had I been drinking a Tomatin for this category, it would have been the Tomatin 14-year-old. The 14-year-old is Portwood. It's my go-to Tomatin whiskey. There's never not a bottle with about this much left in it in the house, and then a full one getting topped up. So I would be lying if I said my Permashelf wasn't something that I get a staff price on. You know, that would be a ridiculous thing to do. But what I'm going to have is...
Well, just to pause on the Portwood there for a second. The Portwood, the last time I bought the Portwood, it was very inexpensive. I know it's gone up a wee bit now. What's it sitting at, about 65, is it?
Yeah, 65 is the kind of retail price, so you can probably find it a little bit less.
Okay, so and we're Portwood. It's all natural presentation, but it's not full maturation in port. It's a finish, right?
Yeah. So what we're doing there, we've got 11 years in refill casks, and then 3 years in tawny port casks. And the reason that we have to do it that way, the casks that we're using have held tawny port for about 50 years. So there's no wood influence. And it would be quite a wishy-washy whiskey if it was fully matured in those casks, because you'd have no oak structure underneath the cask. So that first 11 years is just building in a bit of depth. It's allowing the distillery character to come through. Then that final 3 years in the tawny casks, huge amount of flavour from those.
Perfect. And I think it was it's been something. I mean, port wine and wine in general tends to be something that is one of my least favoured profiles or categories, let's say, when it comes to Scotch whisky. I'm getting better at a lot of them. I'm starting to enjoy and appreciate them a wee bit more. And yet, I say that, and I'll caveat what I've just said by saying, when somebody comes to me and says to me, what do you think of Tomatin? What would you recommend in Tomatin? I tend to push them towards the 14-year-old Portwood, because it's got a lovely, lovely red berry, big fruity flavour hook, because it's natural, because it's reasonably priced, And I think it's one of these whiskies that, especially as a recommendation, it's gonna be memorable for folk. It's a decent whiskey, but that's not what you're pouring.
No.
As David Hong has bought us a wee dram to say, welcome back, Scott. And David's suggesting he's going to be picking it up on the replay. David, that's awful nice of you to drop in and buy us a wee dram, and welcome back, Scott, buddy. Cheers to you. Thanks, my friend.
Cheers, David.
But that's not what you're pouring for your Permashelf offering. This is going to get interesting then.
This is going to be a curveball straight off the bat. So,
okay, good.
And I've got to pour this whiskey because anytime I'm asked at a tasting, what do you drink at home? My answer is this.
Oh, that is a curveball.
Yeah.
Now could I join you with it? Yes. No, I think it's the 46 I've got. That is. Clink, clink. Sorry to shoot offset, but that just proves that it's not staged at all. I have no idea what you're pouring. This one isn't even open, but it's slightly different from what you've got. This is the 46.
The 46.
What recipe 46? I don't know what it's about or whatever. But that is so you're enjoying.
Yeah.
It's a very nice, tasty bourbon. So you flung it in over ice with a tumbler, just relaxing.
And that's why
ice cube, superb.
That's why it belongs on my Permashelf. So whenever I'm talking to people, I always make the distinction. There's a big difference between appreciation and enjoyment. And a lot of what we'll be doing tonight is with our noses in Glencairn glasses and picking apart whiskies and stuff. But my day-to-day job is involved in nosing and tasting whiskey. And sometimes I just want to be able to switch off and not have to. It's very difficult to sit with a dram and not find yourself analysing it. Sometimes I just want something to drink while I'm watching a film or reading a book. And I find myself over and over and over again reaching for bourbon. And I find that in the UK, it's difficult to get good quality at good value. I got this with my Tesco Club card today for 23 quid. You know, you can't really moan at that at all. It's 45%. It's a cracking bourbon. And I'll sit and sip on that all night without having to worry that, I'm getting vanilla or anything. It's just a drinking. It would be like having a beer or having a glass of wine for me.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of people and watching from the States would say, why are they not picking up the Buffalo Trace? Unfortunately for us, Buffalo Trace is 40% here.
Yep.
And I know that it's criminal and you guys go nuts for it, but the Maker's Mark is at 45. The other good one is the Wild Turkey 101, which you often get on offer as well. Obviously, that higher ABV, 50.5% ABV as well, is fantastic bourbon. But you've nailed it when you talk about the tumbler, because that very act of enjoying the whiskey from a tumbler helps you disconnect and not have to analyze every sip. When you're holding it in a tulip-shaped glass, there is this sense of you're just kind of holding it under your nose most of the night, which is great fun. But sometimes you're absolutely right. You just want to sit back and sip. Let me skip back. Let me bring it back down to where we broke off, and I'll tell you my theory why I think that it's different, and it's good that you work for a company that they let you just riff. They let you just be as candid as you want to be and tackle everything. Number one, because actually in whiskey, there's nothing to hide. Actually, there's no reason to hide anything. The only reason to hide something is if that somebody can't explain it in a rational way to make it understood why it is so. Because whiskey is a very well-founded, very tightly controlled, high-quality product that does have some things that enthusiasts especially really want to know. They really want to understand. And even when they hear the answer of why it exists, it might still frustrate them, but at least they know what the answer is. I think often, Scott, a lot of people that end up working in whiskey, and it makes sense because there's a limited pool of suitable candidates that are whiskey geeks, right? To end up in the roles of whether it's front of house, whether it's tour, hospitality, brand ambassadorship, sales, business development, distribution, logistics, whatever it is. Not everybody can be a whiskey geek, but when somebody has an asset like a Scott Adamson, I think they can relax a little bit and be confident that you can openly talk about whiskey, not just within your own portfolio, but as a general concept, to help teach people and educate them why some things exist, why some things are so. It must be hard to recruit people, right?
I mean, luckily, I've not lost my job, so they've not had to try and recruit anyone else. I think, you know, what you're saying there, I think the big thing for me and the approach I've always taken is that if I'm honest about this stuff, about everything, if I'm honest about the things that people maybe don't normally get to ask about, then they know that I'm being honest when I'm talking about things about products and talking about the brand. It gives authority to everything I say if I'm honest about the tricky conversations as well. I think in terms of bringing people in, there's so many people that are capable of that are whiskey geeks that are capable of hosting tastings and that are capable of talking about whiskey. But there's a lot of other stuff that goes around it that I think is maybe not often seen. You know,
The dirty side.
the dirty side. I think people quite often see the Instagram side and think that's the greatest job in the world. And don't get me wrong, it absolutely is. But I think I've always said the greatest job.
No, sorry, I just need to stop you there. I've got the greatest whiskey job in the world, Scott. Just sorry. No, I'm just making a joke there, but this is definitely something I'm glad you're talking about. This is definitely something I wanted to pick up. That Instagram, that vibe, that kind of sense of, you know, the glamorous side of the travel and seeing the world and pouring drinks and socializing into the wee small hours.
Yeah,
that is not an easy gig, surely.
Yeah. And it's interesting, you know, I think the point you made there that, you know, it'll be difficult for everyone doing this job to be a whiskey geek just because of the number of people there are. I don't understand how anyone can do this job without being absolutely head over heels in love with not only whiskey, but particularly the brand they work with, because you have to give so much of yourself to it. So I don't understand how anyone can do this job without being a whiskey geek. That's what really impresses me.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's kind of that's an interesting thing as well, because I imagine tiredness from travel. I imagine, you know, you having to balance family life with the calendar, the really stressful calendar that comes from the work requirements and things like that. But I imagine a lot of it is just about monitoring sales, where the business, how many cases are being sold here, how many new products are being taken up here, and I can imagine that so much of it is that, so much of it is tedious. I mean, is there a sense that, and I suppose the easiest way to ask this is just to say, because you've been in it are you getting on for a decade now? 10 years?
This will be 11 years this summer.
Wow, okay, 11 years now. Do you still feel that sense of privilege? When we've spoken in the past, you've mentioned it. Do you feel, despite all of that grind?
Yeah, definitely. So a good example. I'm just back from 2 weeks in Asia. Over the last 8 weeks, I've had one weekend at home. And in that time, I've been to Germany, Switzerland, China, Malaysia, Singapore, Hong Kong. And last weekend, weekend previous, I was in Hong Kong for the very, very first time. I arrived in from Malaysia, went to meet our local distributor, walked outside the hotel and looked over the bay onto Hong Kong City for the first time. And I was just like, this place is unbelievable. I've never, you know, so that sense of just
exploration. And
yeah, absolutely. And the cool thing about that as well was that Fiona from Springbank was in Hong Kong at the same time. So the morning before the show, we decided to go and see a little bit of Hong Kong. So that's the other thing, is you've got buddies from around Scotland. It's a little bit like a traveling circus. So you're getting to explore the world. You're getting to meet great people and spend time with them. And then you're getting to pour whiskey and talk to people who you get to see people from around the world engaging with, in some cases, the product that you've made yourself. And there's something very, very fulfilling in that.
Yeah. That is amazing. You haven't done very well in terms of telling people how just that you may how hard work it is. It does sound like a lot of travel, and one weekend in 8 to be at
Yeah.
home. I know young
Yeah.
family and things like that. I can imagine that is really tricky. But
Yeah.
that you did make that's a brilliant advert for whiskey brand ambassadorship right there.
So
Glenn
let me counter
Duncan's
that
in
then.
Australia and he's bought us a wee dram as well. No comment, Glenn. But thank you very much, my friend. Thank you for the dram. I'll try and keep my eye out in case you're trying to get a hold of Scott and you just forgot to put the comment in. Jimmy Legg has bought me a dram too. Okay, brace yourself for a Jimmy dram. He's saying, really loving how much Scott is rocking, the young Jack Grealish haircut. No, so you don't have the band in, so you're not quite Grealish.
I need to get a band. Need to get a band. Yeah.
Aye, and he's creating a lot of jealousy. Aye, for me too, Jimmy. Maybe you're like me, my friend. We both miss her hair, don't we? James DeGiulio is in and saying, just in case Jimmy Legg needs another dram. Fantastic, James. Thank you very much. James, I wonder if you're going to make it over from New York for Jimmy Fest at the end of September, buddy. Thank you all for your drams. Thank you very much. Cheers.
So let me then hit you with a story that maybe does make the case as to how it's not always rosy.
Well, you have to balance it out. Absolutely,
go. Balance it out. So before I'd gone over to this last trip, I was out in China for a week for the first time, and in 7 days we visited 6 cities. So we visited Guangzhou, Shantou, Chengdu, Shenzhen, Beijing, and Shanghai. So every morning you would wake up, get on a plane for 5 hours, you would land, you would go to the hotel, you would put the kilt on, you would go and you would host a dinner, and then you would go out and have drinks at night, and then you'd wake up and do it all again the next day. Anyway, by the end of the week, I'm absolutely knackered. All I wanted by the end of the week was a Big Mac. I just wanted some grub. And our flight home is at 7 o'clock on the Sunday morning. So at 4 o'clock in the morning, we get a taxi from the hotel to the airport. I get to the airport, I put my suitcase on the belt and I hand over my passport. And the wonderful woman, who didn't speak a word of English and I don't speak a word of Mandarin, looked at my passport, looked at the screen, looked at me and said, no. Handed my passport back, and I'm just left there standing. What do you mean? No. So I hand it back, and this is going on. By this point, it's maybe 5 o'clock in the morning. And through her translator on her phone, she types in the words, the name on the passport is not consistent with the name on the ticket. So my passport had my middle name on it, Campbell, and my ticket only had Scott Adamson. And what followed was 95 minutes of me and this woman going back and forth, trying to get me on this flight. And she's just telling me that it's not happening. It's not happening. I was with my colleague, Graham, and he was getting irate at this. And he showed her my visa, my Chinese visa. Yeah. And then on his translate typed in the question, how did he even get into China? To which I'm standing there going, don't ask that question. Don't open that bag of worms. You know, we don't want them asking that. And it got to the point where I was looking at him thinking, I'm going to tell you, just go and I'll see you tomorrow. I was going to have to spend another day in China and get a flight home. And eventually someone came along, typed in a couple of words on the keyboard, handed me my boarding pass and said goodbye. For 95 minutes. By this point, we're on the phone to the consulate, we're on the phone to the travel agent. I'm looking for a bar. It's 7 o'clock in the morning, but if I had a Fitbit on, it's setting alarm bells. So, and that's just one small example. You know, that's just the bit that it doesn't matter how good you are at nosing whiskey. It doesn't matter how good you are at hosting a tasting, how much you know about whiskey. There's always going to be little things like that.
You're still going to have to go through the travel challenges and the grind that we all do. Absolutely. Yeah. I've not had that one happen to me yet, but it is a good tip. Anytime you're booking a flight, make sure that your name on the booking matches the passport. Absolutely the same. And I suppose different countries and different cultures have different structures for names and things. So this was some more important to others.
When we got back, I sent a message to our travel agent and just said, you know, this happened. Can we make sure that my middle name's on my booking for upcoming flights? And the response was, I do feel that China Eastern were being a bit dramatic. And I said, be that as the case may be, it was 5:30 on a Sunday morning and you weren't going to answer the phone. So
That's
it was
right.
still a problem.
That's right. It's still a problem, a bit dramatic. I was getting
Yeah.
told I wasn't getting on the flight.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
an imposter to myself. Jimmy Legacy, next someone will be asking, how did he get into a Chinese prison? Exactly. You tell your pal Graham to settle down and not make it worse.
Exactly.
Jason Whiskey
Exactly.
Wise saying, Roy Aquaviti, so great to see you in Limburg, sharing a drama with you in person. Looking forward to visiting Glasgow soon. Buddy, it was an absolute pleasure. It's been so long since I've seen you. That's the great thing about the festivals, that it's really an efficient way, Scott, isn't it, to see all those folk again. I can understand why you missed it so much
Yeah.
during lockdown, right?
It is. It's a great way to see people. A lot of the time, as you say, you feel that you're robbed of time. You know, it's almost like you're almost giving a little teaser. You're given a dram and you want the bottle. You want to speak to these people for an hour, and you never get the opportunity. But it's great. It's a great way of refamiliarizing yourself with people, having a conversation, having a wee chat, and then 9 times out of 10, what ends up happening is you have a conversation with them on the phone in the week afterwards because something's popped up in conversation. So no, I love it. It was crazy not to have that for 2 years.
And I think the agreement that I have to have with my friends, and that's whiskey friends and friends before whiskey, of course, is that because of life being so busy and because of things getting in the way and because of the environments that you meet and get to know these people, and you have to have this agreement that, you know, there can be no bitterness over the fact that weeks or months has passed in between you speaking, right? That the next time you speak, everything's fine. Just pick it up from where you left off.
Exactly.
No excuses, no where you've been. Just
Yeah.
everything is fine. It's just life is getting in the way. It's just, there's no point in adding more stress to it. All right. I get the impression that, and I'll an anecdote from the first time that you ever appeared on the vPub, and I asked you what was in the glass, and I remember what's in the glass, what you had in the glass.
Really?
And the reason I remember is because you talked about it connecting with one of your pals, Andy Bell. So it was Aaron's Cask Strength. It was the bothy you had in the glass when you joined me back
Good
in
memory.
2018. Yeah. Yeah. And I didn't go back and check that. The reason I remember it is because it set a precedent. So everybody that's come on a vPub since, and it doesn't matter, I don't care if you're Billy Walker or James McTaggart or Ian McMillan or any of the, even Jim McEwen, when they came on and we said, what's in the glass? They've always got something that is just something that they enjoy. It's not necessarily from their own portfolio. And that was you that started that precedent way back when.
Excellent.
So, and I think it's important because what that does is it gets the message across immediately. I'm not just about the brand. I love whiskey.
Yeah.
And then after that, you can go on to talk about what the products that you love from your own brand or whatever, of course.
Yeah.
So let me ask then, you're enjoying your bourbon, you're enjoying your Maker's Mark, so that we don't just, we are going to try and keep some structure. Next in the list, and it is, I know that some of these are a little bit kind of nebulous, they're a wee bit vague, but this is, hopefully everybody understands the concept of a crowd pleaser.
Yeah.
It's that bottle, it's that glass, that pour that you've got folk round, and it's a mixed crowd. Some are into whiskey, some not so much. You know, you're just going to pour something where everybody's just going to go, right, okay, this is a good glass. You know,
Yeah.
You know the style of whiskey I'm speaking about, right? Can be tough to pick.
Can be tough to pick. Luckily, within our range, there is one correct answer. And again, this is not the whiskey I'm drinking. I'm just going to get it out of the way because if anyone raises that category and doesn't say Tomat and Legacy, they're lying to themselves. That's the biggest crowd pleaser you're ever going to find. However, tonight, I've kind of stretched crowd pleaser a little bit. I don't know if this will be one that everybody likes, but so far, I've never heard anyone with a bad word to say about this whiskey. And you'll certainly not hear me say a bad word about it. This is the rather dignified Glencadam 15-year-old.
Oh, a belter. An absolute belter. I'll say, I'm going to have a bit of a discussion with you here because I agree with you and I don't agree with you. I think you can pour the Glencadam 15 for everybody in the room and they will be happy. But I think that it's also a very good whiskey for spotting people who love whiskey because the subtleties, the things that you have to unlock in that Glencadam 15 are not obvious at first approach, in my opinion. It's a subtle, it's all ex-bourbon, right? All refill. It's just a really, really, it's just got that creamy, lovely, perfect Highland style. It's a fantastic pick.
And this would be my desert island style of dram. We've talked about this before.
Yeah,
mix of bourbon and refill casks, mid-teens. I'll drink that every day of the week. You know, that is my style of whiskey. And as I say, you're absolutely spot on. I think most people that you pour a glass of this will go, that's nice. But a lot of people will go, wow, that's incredible. You know, this could probably have managed to slot into a handful of the categories we've got coming up, as well as this one.
Yeah, that's a good pick, a very good pick. And what I love about Glencadam as well is just how utterly understated they are, right? If they keep a hold of that branding for just a little bit longer, it'll have gone so far that it'll be super cool again. Do you know what I mean? It's just, they just don't go changing it up. Just keep it, it's just perfect. It's perfect. And of course, we both know one of the balls of energy that's behind the brand right now, and Ian, right? And the stuff that he's going to be bringing in future. I know he's dealing with big holes in stock right now. So, you know, the distillery was shuttered 20 years ago, but Glencadam is really found its strength, and the community is embracing it and talking about it quite loudly. We love the stuff. The Tomatin Legacy is an interesting one. You know how successful that's been on this channel, Scott. You know the blind challenges and things that it's been slipped in on, and it's always surprised people. I just did an interview with the folks up at Glenwivis, and one of the things that they asked me was, you know, we love the recycled reviews. What's your most recycled bottle? And it was Tomatin Legacy is the one that I've thrown away more than any other, to the point that I'm doing you a disservice, because I'm often just throwing it. I'm not recording or sharing it because I've already done it 2 or 3 times, right? Which is I shouldn't do that. I should genuinely just keep revisiting these things. But again, it's a value proposition thing. I know it's 43%. We've talked about that in the past. It's pointing at a very specific demographic of whiskey. I'll continue to bully you until my last breath that it should be at 46, because if people are coming in at 43% more, isn't a big deal. But you know, we've had that discussion, we've kicked it to death, and it remains, when all is said and done, a fantastic glass of whiskey at 43%, and especially at the price point that it's at. So I would not have been miffed in the slightest if you did a wee Tomatin Legacy as a crowd pleaser. I think it works perfectly.
I think where it fits in so well is that I think when we talk about crowd pleaser, we want to say, we have in our head as whiskey geeks this image of, you know, some people standing with Glencairns and then other people drinking it in a tumbler, you know. But what it's also good for is the people that don't want to drink whiskey at all, but you can make a wonderful cocktail with it. You can make a nice, refreshing long drink. So it's a crowd pleaser of crowd pleasers, because as long as you like alcohol, you're going to find a way of having that liquid in a glass that's going to appeal to you. And I think that's where it fits that moniker of crowd pleaser so well.
Aye, absolutely. I agree. I don't know what the RRP is. RRP is probably 30 to 35. I don't know, but you can regularly pick it up in the 20s, and that's what makes it so easy. Jason Whiskey Wise, sorry, I picked you up there, Jason, didn't I? Graham Fraser is saying, so here I am after an amazing little brown dog tasting with Andrew Smith and the Good Spirits Company in Glasgow tonight. Hope the barflies are all good. Graham, it's good to have you in. You're always a busy guy doing everything everywhere. Brilliant stuff. Jason Whiskey Wise is saying, also got to see Scott in Hong Kong briefly. Fantastic. And Luna Aaron is saying, to Scott, with a lovely dram of Cù Bòcan, number 5, such a wonderful dram. Now, I don't have the number 5.
You do. It's the green one.
Oh, is that the Andean Oak? Is it?
Aye. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Now, I need to. You said it was Julie at the distillery.
Yeah. So I spoke to her today, and it was a sample of signature that she sent along with that. But she says that in the future she will try and be more creative and send you a blind sample.
Okay. Aye, perfect. Well, I actually thought it was the way it became packaged. I thought I'd looked it out actually. Maybe it's still here. I think I did look it out, but it's not in front of me. But yeah, there was a half sample bottle, right. And I thought that maybe you had packed it. I actually thought that you had sent me this So everybody knows that I don't give my address out for folk in order for people not to send me bottles. So an unexpected package turned up from Julie of this. And at first, because you and I had been speaking about trying to book a date, this is weeks and weeks and weeks ago, I thought you had instigated this. And I was like, Scott, you know better than that. You know better than that. Don't be sending me. And you're like,
I know nothing
that's
about
not
it.
me. I didn't do that.
And at this point, Julie, I didn't even know that this was going to happen. So this was just pure fluke.
Yeah. So Julie's obviously got my address from things that's been sent in the past. Probably things I've left behind at Tomatin, more likely. But tell her thank you very, very much. But it means that I can't review it.
Yeah.
So if I buy things with my own money, I'm happy to review them, and it's just kind of, and I know that it's a wee bit petty, and it's a bit kind of, but it's just to keep it simple for me.
Yeah.
So I'm going to sit and I'm going to enjoy this with you tonight, Scott, along with Luna Aaron as well, who's obviously enjoying it. She's saying such a wonderful dram. Cheers, Luna. Cheers to you, and cheers to Julie. Thanks for the bottle, Julie.
Cheers all.
And I mean, the message is out there. Most people know. I think it's been so long since anybody sent me a bottle of anything. And it's just, I know it's been silly, right? But it's just, once you kind of have a thing, you
got to stick to it or not.
Anyway.
Yeah.
There's something came in from Josh Pench. Good to see you, Josh. He's celebrating being a Barfly member for 24 months. He's saying, cheers all. Wonderful topic this evening. Hey, whiskey's always a wonderful topic, isn't it, Josh? Nice to have you, buddy. And Chris Brook is saying, crowd pleaser, eh? I call those wife pleasers. If she enjoys it, most people will too. Glenfiddich 12, Scotch and Canadian blends, and 90 proof bourbons are all things I keep around for this purpose. There you go. I'm still trying to get my wife she will occasionally take a dram. She will. I remember us enjoying a dram together on Isla, for example, and she will occasionally have a sip, but she doesn't tend to ask for a second glass still.
Yeah.
Does your wife enjoy whiskey?
She enjoys whiskey sours. We've just had our second child, so she's not been enjoying much alcohol for the last year now. But
of course,
the incredible thing is I can quite often give my wife a glass of whiskey, and she'll reel off aromas, and then go, "Oh no, I don't want any." I'm like, oh, you've just written all my tasting notes for me, So
but you find cherries and chocolate and lots of delicious things in there. You don't want to drink it. Yeah. I notice my kids are capable of doing that as well. If they see me with a glass, they'll occasionally just come along, and often I put it under their nose as well. I'm curious.
Yeah.
And, they will just come out with things, and you're like, oh, wow, yeah, it is, isn't it? Things that you've perhaps not picked up yourself more often than not.
It was funny during the pandemic there, a couple of times a week, I would say to my wife, can you go and pour me a glass of whiskey from my collection and take it through to me? Don't tell me what it is. Just so I could kind of be nosing things with a blind approach to it, like a wholly blind approach. And it was brilliant, and it was going very, very well. And then there was one week that she came with a whiskey, and I was like, I know what this is, but there's no way she's done that. So I had a little triple pack of miniatures.
Yeah.
Japanese whiskey that was given to me by Tatsuya Maganawa when he was working for Suntory. And within that, there was a sample of Yamazaki 18-year-old.
I knew that was coming.
And this little sample pack, the only reason I still had it was because I never paid anything for it. And I'd just been watching the price of it go up and up and up at auction. And that's never the approach that I take. So I'm actually very glad that she did open it. But there was that moment of, I can't believe you've just opened that. But it went down. It went down an absolute treat. So, can't be too angry about it.
Well, the only rule I have if my kids or my wife or anybody's pouring anything is just pour what's open, don't open anything, right?
Yeah.
But there's one time my son James came in with a glass filled up to here. And I said, well, thank you very much. And I'm sipping away. And of course, I never guessed what it was, because I didn't think for a second that he would have dug out from the back of the cabinet my bottle of Brora and given me about 4 or 5 measures of it in a glass. But he did. But if I'm lazy, if I'm going to encourage him to do that, then that's part of the spoils, a bit like your Yamazaki.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Rick Johnson's bought us a dram to say, I see what you mean about YouTube, Roy. I tried to make this a $500 dram donation and it slipped over 2 decimal places. Rick, nice one, buddy. Thank you very much, my friend. Thank you. And let's raise a wee glass to our friend from last week, Hoyt, who was on the other side of that mistake, and we're trying to work out how we can reunite him with these funds. Thank you very much, Rick. Cheers to you. I'm going to tell you right away that the reason that I think it's nuts that you haven't been bullied about Cù Bòcan generally is that, you know, I think everybody that loves whiskey, all types of whiskey, whether it's peated or unpeated, everything, but we all kind of end up coming down to that point that we made talking about Glencairn 15. So many of us end at that kind of cul-de-sac where we just decide that, you know, refill bourbon with a decent amount of years, because Scotch whiskey, let's be honest, in our climate, that cold, humid climate, it needs the time, a lot of the time, especially if it's in a refill cask, to really shine and do its best. So we're at the sweet spot, 15 years old, fantastic. You and I can agree that it's a wonderful whiskey to sit and enjoy. We don't want it to be the only, we love the variation. But I think another thing that we come to appreciate and really enjoy, Scott, and I don't think there's enough of it out there, is this. I know that Cù Bòcan is, the malt is about 40 ppm. Is that right?
Yeah. So when we first started making Cù Bòcan in 2005, it was only 15 ppm. And that stayed the case up until 2012. But then every year since then, we've gradually increased it to the point that it is about 40 ppm. But what's remarkable is when we went through the rebrand process in 2019, one of the things we discussed was having a brand that had both lightly and heavily peated whiskey. We tried the young samples next to the older samples, and they were much and such the same. So regardless of how much smoke we throw at the barley, the way the distillery is designed, there's only so much of those phenols that are going to survive that still. So even at 40 ppm, which, you know, you're going to start seeing that from 2015 onwards. What you have in the glass tonight is 2011, so it's still in that 15 ppm stage. It's going to be a little bit more phenolic.
So this green one, this Creation 5, is 2011.
Yeah.
So it's about 11 or 12 years old then?
Aye, that's right.
Okay, but there's no age on here.
Correct.
It's non-age statement. Okay, so we know it's 11 or 12 years old. But this is really quite a sweet whiskey. This is almost a dessert whiskey here. Yeah. And it might be because of what I've sipped beforehand, of course, but I'm getting lots of really, really rich toffee.
Yeah.
There's a creaminess here. It's sweet, but it's not a sickly sweet thing, but it is something that you could suggest as almost it's sweet enough and it's rich enough to be an after dinner dram, honestly.
Yeah. For me, Creation 5, it's all banana. It's campfire bananas.
Yeah.
So, and that's this Colombian oak. So it was a really cool thing when I came back in 2018 and started working in cask selection and blending. One of the first people that got in touch with me was a gentleman called Richard Bales. And he told me that he'd been working with a cooperage and the forestries in Colombia, and that they were starting to produce Andean oak casks, and would we like some? And knowing what we were doing with Cù Bòcan, with this more experimental R&D approach to the whiskey, I said, absolutely, let's get our hands on some. And it took about 3.5 years for the casks to come to us. Bureaucracy within the Colombian Forestry Commission, COVID, weather, getting the wood off of the hills. So these trees grow at 4,000 meters above sea level on a chain of volcanoes in the Andes Mountains. Wow. So getting to the forests and then getting the trees out was an absolute nightmare. By the time they had them out, by the time they had the casks made, there were no containers left to ship things. There was a big shortage of shipping containers for a whole year.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So then we got these casks in 2021, and we filled the whiskey in it, and it took a year finish. You know, normally for me, a year is a short finish. I know there's some companies out there that will have a finish in 6 months.
But this is virgin oak then, isn't it?
Yeah, virgin Colombian oak. It's the first single malt whiskey to be matured in Colombian oak casks. And that's what Cù Bòcan's all about, is finding these things. And what we know from these, it's a different species of oak. It's called Quercus humboldti. It's not Alba, it's not Robur, just grown in different areas. It's a totally different species. And it's got less of the kind of cis-lactone than American oak, so less of that sweetness. It's got less tannin than European oak, but it's got more of the compounds that are going to give you spicy aromas there. That married with the smoke.
There's ginger here.
Yeah.
Ginger.
Yeah. So that's where the sweetness is coming from, is that virgin oak. But it comes across for me in a slightly more herbaceous way than an American oak cask might.
But when you talk about banana, sometimes with a new make spirit, we'll get a green banana note, a very banana forward. That's not, the banana here is a ripe banana thing, right? It's which is again a wee bit different from the kind of confectionery banana that we sometimes get.
The thing that it does remind me of when you say confectionery banana is, do you remember toffos?
Yes,
the banana toffos.
Banana toffos. Wow,
it's a banoffee sort of thing.
Can we still get banana toffos?
I know.
Suddenly got a craving. Ah, dear. Amazing. Well, while we're on the subject of Cù Bòcan, I mean, I tell you what, we'll go on to your one, and I wanted to stay on the topic of Cù Bòcan, because there was a Cù Bòcan that came out at the end of last year, and it kind of took the wind out of a lot of us. Not just because it was a fantastic whiskey, but we were a little bit, where does this come from? But before we get there, number 3 is, I'm asking you to pick a decadent pick.
Mm-hmm.
What's your decadent pick going to be? When I talk about decadent, what I'm speaking about something, yes, we're speaking about a treat whiskey here. We're speaking about something that's a wee bit special. But we're also talking about, you know, that way that whiskey can feel elegant. It can feel almost luxurious. It can feel like a really quite special. When we're drinking as much whiskey as we are, as whiskey botherers, we can almost get a wee bit dumbed down and start to take things for granted a wee bit. But there are still whiskies out there that you can sip and you say, aye, okay, this is a very special thing. It's usually got a bit of elegance to it, a bit of luxury to it, something like that. Is that a kind of difficult one for you to pick, or did you manage?
It wasn't a difficult one. I had a couple of examples. What was difficult was, when I think of decadent in whiskey, I think of sherry casks. And I am not the biggest fan of sherry matured whiskey. I'm a massive fan of sherry. And when we're talking about the Cù Bòcan 15, we'll talk about sherry. But for me, decadence in whiskey is something that makes me kind of stop, you know, and think, oh wow, this is an experience. This is not that showstopper thing, but just getting to try this. What an incredible thing. It's something special. It's a treat. And I've picked a whiskey that I first got to try in 2019 and was blown away by it, and then was able to track a bottle down when I was in Belgium and buy a bottle of it. And since then, I've never been able to open the bottle because of what has happened on the secondary market. And it's been one of those things that I've just watched it and thought, I'm never going to get to open this bottle. So even opening the bottle in itself has become the decadence here. So I'm going to rip the top off, and then I'm going to tell you what it is.
Oh my goodness.
So I've just done it.
The Rumwood. Oh my goodness.
Springbank.
Is the foil off it?
Foil's off it.
Oh wow.
Right,
well, a round of applause for that, Scott Adamson. I don't know how much the Rumwood is, but I imagine now it's a 15-year-old as well, that one, wasn't it?
Don't tell me. Don't tell me. I don't want to know.
Okay, let's not talk about it. If anybody's curious, they can go and see. Now, as Springbank is so good at doing, I constantly, for example, Springbank through their Longrow Red series were good at teaching me that wine casks can be compelling and delicious. And I was often talking about how I don't really like rum finished and rum matured, and then that Springbank 15 came along. Now, if only we've had the foresight back in the day, when we could. It did take a wee bit of effort, honestly, when it came out to get one, but they were available.
Yeah.
But we tried it at the Whiskey Club. And the Bon Accord had a bottle on the go, if I remember well. Had a dram of that too, and thought, "Aye, that's delicious. That's very, very good." And it stopped there. You know, it was just that's you've kind of had your And now I'm going back. That was maybe 2019, 2018.
Yes, it was. It was 2019.
Yeah.
And so, to be clear, the reason that I'm happy to open this is because I think I picked it up for about 75 euros. You know, when this was first on the shelf, it wasn't what it is now. So, if I had paid the going rate now, I don't think I'd pay the going rate now. But I remember trying it. Cameron McGeechy, we were at the same show, and he said, "Have a try of this." And it was, for months I hadn't had anything that had blown me away, and that came along, and I was like, I need to find that. And I'd been worried for so long that I was never going to get to open this bottle. So
tell you what we're going to do to honor this moment before we start talking about your Cù Bòcan, which is a similar age, is that you've poured it. Is that what's in the glass there?
Yeah.
I'm just going to solemnly stay silent and put the pressure fully on you as we just kind of hope that it brings back some of those memories.
It's good. It's very good. It's very good.
You need to put a wee sample aside for me then, will you?
I definitely will. Yeah, absolutely.
I've got some nice things here, of course, from a similar place that we can exchange. But I think that's really cool that you did that. It's really amazing that you would just kind of rip that open and enjoy it, because it means that's the sad thing about what happens to these whiskies that get chased to the point that we can no longer afford them anymore, because the whiskey makers and the people behind them don't get to hear how much people are enjoying them. Exactly. Because they're staying sealed, because they become commoditized, because they become assets rather than what they're supposed to be, and that's things that remind you what it is to be alive, right? Just the lovely, lovely thing.
And I think if we're talking about the categories that we've got tonight, you know, in terms of the flavor profile, that's not a whiskey that's going to naturally align itself to what you'd consider to be a decadent whiskey. But because of what Springbank has become now, this, every time I have a dram of this, it'll be a little bit of a luxury. You know, it's going to be that little bit of a special occasion just by virtue of what is in the glass.
Yeah. And I think that the decadence also, I think by the way that probably that whiskey is a good fit for a decadent drink. I think it's also just by the fact that, you know, how much of a privilege it is going to be to sip it every time we do sip it. Not because of how much, as you say, how much when it was on the primary market when it was first launched, but how much it's just because of the commodity that's become on the secondary market. The fact that it is open now, it is breathing, and it's going to be enjoyed. There's going to be that air of decadence every time you approach it, right? As you can treat yourself with it.
Yeah.
Rob Smith is saying now, sorry, Rob Smith is saying now, I have to open my Springbank 15 Aquavita. Yes, Rob, you don't have to, but it seems like a fitting moment. That 15-year-old was awesome, says Black Fen. And Ian Bruce is saying, visited Colombia to have, as I have family from there. They have plantain, which differs from our usual banana. That's right, I've seen plantain. I've never tasted it. But I think, do you have to cook plantain? I'm not sure if you can eat it raw. And he's saying, did the lack of available containers help allow the staves to air dry for longer? Be interesting if future comparisons are made on shorter transportation times.
Yeah.
I wonder.
I mean,
you're not sure.
So the answer to that question would be no. So the problem we had was that the casks were ready by this point. The casks were coopered, they'd been charred, they were ready to go, but there were just no boats to get them to Scotland. So the drying process takes place before the wood is even cut into staves. It's when the timber is out in the yard. So there wasn't any kind of slowing process there. It was just at that final stage of let's get these on a boat now. And it's the reason that bourbon casks have become more expensive in the last couple of years. Just getting stuff on the water has been tough.
We're going to have to be much more clever about how that's such a valuable, a necessary resource. It's you know, we're going to just have to be good at getting the most out of the casks that we have as well. I think. It's tough times for resources generally. Ebhead is saying, I drank my friend's bottle every time I visit him, so I never get to open mine. Laughing emoji. Rolf is playing a clever game there. He's talking about his Springbank 15, no doubt, the rum cask. The perks of running a whiskey tube channel, Roy says, multi-mission Menno. That I can hopefully steal
100%.
a resample. That's not nothing to do with having a YouTube channel. It's just being very, very cheeky and brazen. I'm just asking. Jimmy Legg is saying Springbank hasn't become anything. It's exactly the same. It's people that have changed. Jimmy, you're spot on, buddy. You really are. And Hoyt is saying, what a day. Glad to be home and share a dram with the barflies. Good to have you in, Hoyt. Mentioned you a couple of times tonight, buddy. Let's keep in touch and make sure that you get sorted after last week. Terrific stuff. So I have to draw our attention to this now, Scott, and I'm glad to have you on. I'll tell you the story behind this dram that's in my glass now. Last year, maybe about November time, maybe earlier than that, our friend Sevi, one of the bottle chasers, gets in touch, and he just puts it in the group chat and he says, this bottle is amazing, boys, look out for it. It's brilliant. Now, all of us say, well, thank you, Sevi. We will look out for it. But it's Sevi we're talking about. He's the guy that loves dirty whiskies. He loves extreme whiskies. He loves in your face. He likes oddball whiskies. When Sevi recommends a whiskey, there's always context. You have to caveat everything, right? You have to. So we're all going, okay. But eventually I was curious, and I was curious because of the absurdity of the specs on this bottle, right? I'm used to seeing Cù Bòcan, right? I remember Cù Bòcan from the old bottling. It's before it was rebranded. And I'm certainly used to seeing the signature and the creation series now. It's a familiar thing. But suddenly, there's a 15-year-old age-stated Cù Bòcan from nowhere after every other release, bar the vintages, the old vintages, being non-age statement, if I'm correct. And suddenly we have a 15-year age statement. Not only that, it's bottled at 50%. It's very encouragingly got a 2022 edition label, which suggests that we might be lucky to get more. But it's also 15-year full maturation in Oloroso sherry casks. So this isn't somebody being playful and experimental and using the Cù Bòcan kind of no borders attitude about just creating something to see how it's enjoyed. This is brutally honest Highland whiskey using lightly peated malt, 15 years from a sherry cask. This is almost quintessential Highland malt whiskey, old school style. So I dropped the coin on it. It was a pretty coin. It was £90, and it arrived, and I looked at it, and I opened it that very night, and I sent Sevi a message to say, aye, you're right, son, you're right. This enhanced my Christmas. It's fabulous whiskey, but huge caveat, it is not, so it's full maturation and first fill sherry, first fill Oloroso, which is crazy because you almost know what that's going to taste like, and yet this does not. The spirit in here is intact. There's structure to it. It's still firm and communicative. It's not all about the sherry. It's lovely and dry and spiced, and it flashes and it flickers, and it's an absolutely incredible bottle of whiskey, Scott. Incredible. I thought £90 was too expensive. As soon as I was beyond the shoulder, £90. If I could have got another one straight away, I probably would have picked up another one. An absolute blinder. How can it be, Scott, that Cù Bòcans are all non-age statement and suddenly we're treated to an absolute belter like this with 15-year age statement on it? Where did it come from?
So I'll take a step back a little bit now, just so that everyone who's watching is aware that now I am looking after all Cù Bòcan. So that's part of my role in blending now is whether it's signature creations, 15-year-old stuff like that. I get to be involved in Cù Bòcan throughout the process, even when it comes to that conversation about what we're going to release and when. And so we need to kind of go back to the rebrand in 2019. So in 2019, we rebranded Cù Bòcan, and the focus was product forward. You know, the whole story is about the product, lightly peated, made for 1 week every year, made in the winter, sweet but smoky, and then an experimental approach to maturation. But and that's what Cù Bòcan has been. Signature has that with the bourbon, the virgin oak, and the sherry. That's our core product. And then beyond that, we have the creations, which is where we get to do those slightly more unusual, that much more unexpected type of thing. With everything that we're doing with Cù Bòcan, we're trying to be unexpected. And what's more unexpected than your first age statement not being a 10-year-old or a 12-year-old, but being a 15-year-old? And better yet, let's crank the ABV up a little bit. And what can we do from a maturation story? So from the maturation point of view, this is a survivor. So 2000 go back in time, everything in the Highlands of Scotland was lightly peated up until the 1960s. Yep. Every drop of tomatin up until the 1960s was lightly peated. That's why I like things like Glencadam, because they're still old school. There's still that little bit of funk in there. But what happened was in the 1960s, North Sea oil was discovered, and blenders were increasingly looking for non-peated whiskey. Yes. So with the discovery of North Sea oil, other fuel sources become available. Also, the roads are built into Scotland at that point in time. Yep. So you're able to take coal up to the maltsters. And the market is looking for non-peated whiskey. And that's how the tomatin spirit of today was born, that light, elegant, fruity characteristic that we're known for. Then we fast forward to 2005, and a huge amount of what we're doing is blended whiskey. And our master distiller at the time, a guy called Dougie Campbell, he recognized that the price of the peated whiskies that we were buying was starting to increase. We're talking specifically about things like Bowmore and Lafroig. Mental to think that 20 years ago, they were going into blended whiskies, you know.
I know.
And so the price was going up and up and up. So Dougie, realizing that he still had one of the biggest distilleries in Scotland in terms of capacity, thought, right, for the last week of production this year, I'm going to bring in some lightly peated barley for blending purposes. But Dougie had worked at tomatin for, at that point, over 40 years. He started in 1961 as a 15-year-old, and he would have been getting his daily dram every day.
And he remembers the peaty days.
Exactly. He remembers what tomatin used to be. So when this stuff starts coming off the stills, the cogs start turning, and, you know, absolutely some of it's going to have to go for blending, but there's a good chunk there that we can put into some really decent pieces of wood. So that's when we filled for the first time virgin oak. We filled first fill bourbon barrels, and we filled Oloroso sherry casks. And the decision was made at that point in time that we'll do this every year. And then in 2013, that first spirit is ready to be bottled as single malt. And the Cù Bòcan signature that we still have today is created. That mix of bourbon, virgin oak, and 25% Oloroso sherry casks. Yep. And we've bottled that ever since. So that happens. And then it's going back 3 years now, we're sitting looking at the stocks and start to realize that from every year, from 2005, 2006, 2007, 2008, there's a little bit of sherry matured stock left. And what we'd been doing at the same time was deconstruction tastings. So with Cù Bòcan, what I love to do is show people signature and then show them the individual components.
Sure, makes sense. Yep, good fun.
And surprisingly enough, people tended to enjoy the sherry matured component. So everything's starting to add up. And we had the meetings, we went through the NPD process, we went through the sampling process, which didn't take long because there was really only 4 casks left. And we decided this stuff is too good right now. You know, this stuff's not going to get better by leaving it till it's 20 years old, till it's 25 years old. This is good to get bottled right now. So we bottled 3,000 bottles of Cù Bòcan, 15 years, fully matured in Oloroso sherry, bottled at 50%. And what I love about it personally is that So much of Cù
So
Bòcan
that's how
is,
small an outturn this was. That's
yeah,
incredible.
yeah,
Yeah, wow.
yeah. And the majority of that was from that very first production of Cù Bòcan in 2005. So this
Yes.
is the earliest stock of Cù Bòcan spirit. What I love about it is that throughout the creations and the Cù Bòcan signature, we're taking this really traditional approach to spirit production by having that lightly peated spirit, but we're marrying in this really modern approach to maturation, using different casks, using new cask types. With the Cù Bòcan 15-year-old, you nailed it. It's old school.
Yeah.
This is what whiskey would have tasted like at Tomatin 70 years ago,
Yeah.
or as close as we're going to get to it without brewer's yeast and worm tubs and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And what I love about it, I said already, I'm not a big fan of sherry matured whiskey. This is not what you would consider to be a modern sherry matured whiskey. It's not
No.
sweet. It's not cloying. There's an earthiness to it. There's a dirtiness, but there's an elegance within that as well. The peated spirit, it's not smoky. It's earthy. It's real dirt and soil. And for me,
No,
it's
I honestly, I think it's one of those drams, especially me, I suffer regularly, as everyone knows, from peat blight, as you know, especially when it's subtle. I don't even pick up smoke sometimes. I've got to sip it alongside something that is completely unpeated in order to do so. I think you could put this in front of so many people and they would be the same. And the peat comes across as a savory element.
yeah,
It's a seasoning.
yeah, absolutely. For me, this is one of those whiskies that I'm massively proud of. The company being able to maintain the stock, then to release it, to bottle it, the fact that we were able to get through everything that goes on behind the scenes to get a whiskey like this out into the market. And then to see how well it's been received and the effect that it has on Cù Bòcan as a whole is unbelievable.
Aye, Scott, I have to just, I loved getting my hands on this. I love the fact that Sevi had brought us a bottle and we could all just cheer about it and love it. Gregor over in the States, you know Gregor as well.
Yeah.
He doesn't like peaty whiskey, but he raves about this whiskey. It's almost this, and even our pal Scott, who really, it needs to be an exceptional sherry cask to get Scott into the sherry cask. I can see him sitting down and enjoying this too. So you brought us a fantastic whiskey, but what you actually brought us was hope, because things are dark in whiskey right now in so many facets for whiskey botherers like us. And I know that we bang the drum and we get in our soapbox and we do all of these things, but you know, because you're a whiskey geek too, and you have to buy your own whiskey too. That Springbank 15 is an example. It's getting more and more expensive to grab the stuff that we love. So we are now looking at the horizon to see what new products are going to be developed, what new distilleries are going to bring to us. And then out of the blue, from a distillery that's been going for 125 years or more, and a range that we've known for a number of years now, just out comes this 15-year-old with very minimal fanfare. And I now understand why. It's only 3,000 bottles. And it's just, it makes you feel comfortable that there are people out there, there are products out there are casks out there that's going to bring fantastic spirit to us in the future. You're not going to put, this is not a mass market product for you. This is almost like a little treasure that you're sharing with the folk that you know will enjoy this.
Yeah.
And I think that I almost wish I had two, but I don't. Now that I know that there's potentially going to be a new edition of this every year, that's exciting. I'll be happy to enjoy the rest of this. It's one of those bottles that will get better in my memory as time goes forward.
Yeah.
And the fact that I didn't pick up another one means that somebody else out there is going to get their hands on this to experience how nice a whiskey this actually is. And that sense of as close as you're going to get, as you say, to that old school style. Mm-hmm. Fascinating story about Dougie as well. The fact that he was able to bring this memory back in order to help, create that whiskey and what it could possibly be. I mean, it was the late 60s, early 70s that Tomatin stopped floor malting, right? Stopped looking after, stopped peating your own malt, and really turned everything and focused on the blending market.
Yeah.
And now for the last 20 years, you've had to reshift all of that back again and focus on single malt.
Yeah.
So it makes perfect sense that you're going to start, you're going to enjoy bringing out products like this. It's an absolute belter. It really is. And I know for anybody that's a wee bit tired of me talking about it tonight, I hope that you've tried it and you understand why I'm giving it the airtime, because it's so good. I hadn't spoken to you in a year, I think. And out the blue, I messaged you and I messaged you about this just to say, well done. Is that true?
That's about right. And you touched on something there that was a conversation that we had when we were talking about this. And one of the reasons that I was so keen to release it was, this is one of those whiskies that it almost does that thing that a Springbank does, that you'll find yourself in 2 years, 3 years time thinking, when's it coming out? You know, we're going to be doing this every year. There's going to be 500 cases a year, so 3,000 bottles every year. Every winter. So this is going to be Cù Bòcan's kind of big winter release. And it'll get to that point where people are just like, the Cù Bòcan's coming. And that's what I wanted to see. I wanted that excitement, that buzz from whiskey lovers around Cù Bòcan, which is a brand that is appealing to a wider market. You know, it's with Signature, we're appealing to a wider market. With Creations, we're doing things that are a little bit off-piste.
Playful,
but there's going to be that core of people that are watching this tonight, that this is the type of whiskey they're looking for.
Yeah, it's kind of weird, and there is a bit of a fraction there, because the Signature's solid, and the Creation series are playful, short chew, and all of these kind of crazy casks and things. And then with the 15, with this, whether or not it's going to be a 15 every year, I don't know, but with this release, you've got this tribute product. That's what it is.
Yeah.
It's almost like a tribute to the Tomatin of the past. There was a review went out in Dramface, I think it was the start of this week, from Erie. And one of the comments that was made in that review was, 1 week's production is not enough. Right? Have you increased? You've increased the ppm levels over the years. You've admitted that. Are you still at 1 week?
We're still at 1 week. What I will say though is that 1 week at Tomatin is bigger than a lot of distilleries. You know, 1 week at Tomatin is 60,000 litres. So if you think of, and I always treat Cù Bòcan as, you know, Cù Bòcan was essentially founded in 2005. I've always said that Cù Bòcan is like a new distillery that runs for 1 week a year in our distillery.
I understand, because the process is completely different. It's not peated Tomatin. It's a completely different regime that goes on for that time. What I'm saying to you, Scott, is that you need more of this. You need more, and this harks back to the roots of post-war Tomatin, the peated style. I understand that you don't have floor maltons anymore, as you mentioned, the worm tubs and all of these. We know, but this is the tribute to that. And I think it's the neglected category for whiskey botherers. We've got unpeated, we've got heavily peated. There's not enough of this lightly peated, this lovely balanced product. And I for one, am excited to see what comes out for 2023's edition of this at the end of the year. I think it's going to be fascinating to see. Anyway, let's jump into the chat and see what the folk are saying, and say they'll be throwing tomatoes at us, saying, you know, nonsense, it was garbage. I don't think so. I really don't. Rob Smith, is saying, did I pick that one? Really enjoying this conversation, Rob is saying, as well as the chat. Thanks very much. Absolutely. If you're watching live tonight, that's half the fun of this, is to be in the lounge chatting to the fellow barflies as well. Rob, I'm glad you're enjoying the conversation too. Whiskey Radar, good to see you, Rondi, saying, just recently got my hands on a dusty bottle of the 1988 vintage Cù Bòcan, a 27-year-old. Maybe Scott has some background knowledge on the cask composition. I am so curious to open it. Roland, that's the exact same bottle as my brother bought from Alistair Much way back when it came out in 2017. I bumped into Alistair and I was talking about him, and my brother lives down Swindon in Wiltshire.
Right. And
I said, yeah, my brother picked up this. And he said, oh, where did you pick it up from? I said, oh, it was at a tasting down in Wiltshire. And he said, and he told me about the tasting. He told me the night. He described my brother to me. He remembered my brother from which, if anybody's met my brother, they would probably work out why he's memorable. But it was the 1988 one that he picked up. Now, you've just mentioned that 2005 was when you started producing Cù Bòcan peated spirit. How can there be a 1988 and a 1989 and what was the other one, a 1990?
Yeah, 1990. So what happened there was in 2013 we released Cù Bòcan, just a single product which has now gone on to become Signature, believing fully that the oldest peated whiskey we had was from 2005. I remember to this day Charlie Edwards, our production manager at the time, coming over to the office with 3 samples, and they just said Tomatin 1989 on them. And we had a try of them, and they were distinctively peated, more so than Cù Bòcan. You know, this wasn't lightly peated. This was for there to be much of a peat element after near on 30 years, or 25 years it would have been at the time. We were just perplexed. We couldn't figure it out. So we went and we started speaking to some of the members of staff that had been around for a long time. Martin Henry in particular, who's our mashman, still the head brewer on site today. And he told us the story that in the summer of 1989, a batch of lightly peated barley was delivered to the distillery by accident. And the story went even further, that this was at a time where it was still after the big production days of the 1970s, and it was after the liquidation and the buyout. But what I think people don't realize is that in the 1990s, although our production was still scaled back, Tomatin still accounted for 10% of all the malt whiskey made in Scotland in the 1990s.
Wow.
So in 1989, we're still making a lot of whiskey. And the production manager was a guy, and this is Martin's story, that he had a small air rifle in his office. And when he got bored at lunchtime, he would open the window and shoot the rabbits. So nobody ever wanted to go to him with bad news, because they knew that air rifle was kicking about. So they decided that, and at this point in time, everything's still going for blending. You know, there's no Tomatin single malt really.
Yeah.
They decided we're going to distill it, we're going to produce it, and it'll be the blender's problem. Over the years, many of those casks would have gone into blends, 3-year-old, 5-year-old blends. What we were left with was the final 3 casks from that production from the summer of 1989. Interestingly enough, I was at an SMWS tasting recently, and they had a 10-year-old bottle of Tomatin from the 1990s that was from that same production run. It was a sister cask.
Wow.
These 3 casks. So I was able to try the younger spirit years after. Anyway,
Amazing.
so we decided immediately, having stumbled across these 3 casks, there we go, Cù Bòcan 1989, bang, let's go. And we released it. I think there was 1,050 bottles. I've still got one upstairs. I've got a bottle of every Cù Bòcan we've ever released. And the response was massive. So what we did after that was we took some non-peated spirit, some Tomatin spirit essentially, and finished it in casks from Islay. And that's how we got the 1988, and that's how we got the 1990. So the 1989 is peated barley.
Yeah.
The mistake is peated barley in refill hogsheads. The 1988 and the 1999 are peated ex-sherry casks.
Okay, so that kind of makes a bit of sense. You've got some mature Tomatin there.
Yeah.
So you're going to finish it. You're going to give it that peaty element to, again, a kind of tribute release. So there you go, Roland. Hopefully that helps you. Your 1988 vintage is very mature Tomatin that they've put in an Islay cask for a finish. How long of a finish?
Off the top of my head, I couldn't tell you, but I can find out.
Black Fen is saying, ask Scott about the bottles used for Cù Bòcan since the rebrand. I'm not a fan of fancy bottles because I want whiskey, not a shelf ornament. But leafy Cù Bòcan bottles are wonderfully tactile. I also find them very easy to photograph as well.
Yeah.
They're very pretty to photograph. Yeah.
Hard to get a bad photo. Yeah.
I do find that, you know, there's, especially trying to read the label on the back is next to impossible.
Yeah.
But there is enough real estate there, Scott, to put non-chill filtered natural colour on the bottle. It's on the box. I know it's on the box, but it needs to be on the bottle. And but I hear what you're saying, Conrad. It's a very pretty thing, and it's difficult to see the Cù Bòcan branding, though, isn't it? When the bottle's down a bit.
We've changed it slightly on the creations now, so it's a little bit lighter. Which when there's whiskey in the bottle is easier to see, so it'll pop in your photos a little bit more. But that's always going to be one of the issues you have with screen print. Is once the bottle's empty, it's very difficult for it to stand out. But the bottle. Again, like most things nowadays, designers are involved, and we tell them the story, tell them about the product, and they come up with something very pretty. 9 times out of 10, we have to go back to the drawing board because it just cannot be produced. But here, the story throughout the bottle is that you have the story of the interaction between smoke and oak. So the leafy thing, I guess, the lines, that's meant to represent the staves of a cask, and then when you turn it round, it looks like the smoke is coming up through the bottle. But one of my favorite things about the pack, and nobody would ever know this, which is one of the most ridiculous things about it, is on the carton throughout, there's this tiny little black dots throughout. And what happened there was the designer, they phoned me one day and said, "We're looking for some peat." I said, "All right." And they said, "And the only way we can get it here at the design studio in Edinburgh is if we order a pallet, but we only need 1 brick of peat." And I was like, where are you going to buy 1 brick of peat? Anyway, so again, to talk about the dual nature of the job, the week before I'd been hosting tastings in Beverly Hills, and then this week I was up to my knees in gutters at Tomatin Firewood, sourcing a bag of peat, so that I could send a brick of peat to Edinburgh. And anyway, what they did is they pulverized this brick of peat into tiny little pieces and then overprinted it so that any of these little black specks are tiny, tiny little prints of peat.
I had no idea. I have long since discarded my box.
Nobody would know. Nobody would know. It's one of those things. It's like so much attention. I think a lot of the time, as liquid fans, we're quite tempted to throw away the work of designers and think, come on, how much is that adding to the cost of a bottle? But there are some little cool things still happening out there that tell a little bit of a story, and sometimes it's just for a designer to say that he's done that and it's cool. And I think that's the approach that everyone takes to their job. If you can do something.
Well, now what you need to do, now that I've tossed away the 2022 edition box, you need to make sure that we have peat printed on everyone in the future, and then we've got that little cool story, or at least fake peat. But that is a cool wee thing. I know that a lot of folk in here will be hearing that for the first time. By the way, it won't appear in the quiz at the end tonight, but there will be a quiz. There will be a Tomatin Cù Bòcan themed quiz at the end tonight. If Scott doesn't get close to or 10 out of 10 tonight, we'll all be very surprised.
I'm jet lagged, Roy. I'm jet lagged. I'm putting
here's the excuses already. Black Fennis saying, "I thought all Cù Bòcan bottles have natural colour and non-chill filtered, written in spiral just above the name."
Yep, on the front label.
It does. Now there you go, Conrad. And there, I am complaining to you that it's not on the bottle, but yes, as both of us, it's absolutely there. Must pay more attention, Rob. Thanks, Blackfen. Thank you very, very much. You're right. You're spot on. Ryan McLeave is saying, "If I lick the box, will it be peated?" Well, it will, but it'll just taste like dirt because it's not been burned drying, right? And Jaime, not Jamie. Good to see you, Jaime. I hope you're doing well. Is in. And he's saying, "Agua for Scott. I have Cù Bòcan Creation 1 and 2, and I love them, especially the 1. Are there other Cù Bòcans, including the 15 coming to the Philippines?"
Good question. I would need to speak to my colleague, Scott Fraser, who looks after the Philippines. There's always going to be more coming. It's just a case of what and when. Great that Creation 1 and 2 got out there. There was only about 4,500 bottles of each of those. Creation 5's just been launched. There's a bit more volume of that. There's about 8,000 bottles. So hopefully you should start seeing that. And we've got a new product coming out on Wednesday next week that I can't tell you anything about tonight, but it will be a new product that there will be more volume of, and hopefully some of that will come to the Philippines as well.
You can't tell us anything about it. Did you make it?
Yes.
Okay, you can tell us that. Something to look forward to. Fantastic. Tom Elmer is saying, "When I was in Ireland, peat was still sold in the market for the home fire. Happens a lot here, especially up in the Highlands. You can buy peat for various reasons, Tom. quite fun to do and burn. Luna Arnold saying, I really love the boxes of Cù Bòcan as well. So love the story, naturally. And Hoyt is saying that's a brilliant design Easter egg. Absolutely is, Hoyt. Roland is saying, thanks a lot, Scott. Wow, definitely detailed and interesting response. By the way, it was nice to meet you at Nuremberg in March when I was raving heavily about the 15 years old.
Yeah.
Whiskey Radar, the stuff that he brings along to festivals tells me that his taste is very, very, if you're getting endorsement from Roland, it's a good endorsement.
Excellent.
Ian Bruce is saying, is it just the box that's got the peat design? Seemed like Roy's label had the speckles on the close-up as well.
It does.
So the label has it too?
Yeah.
Or just the box?
So that's the Creation 5. It's probably easier to see there with the green. But that all of those little speckles, that's just because
peat?
a designer has pulverized peat.
That's brilliant. That's fantastic. That's really cool. That is, like I go on about the bottles and the cost and the price and everything, but if you get a giggle out of that, that's really good. And then Carsten is saying, guess I need to get that 15-year-old urgently, really loving subtle peated bottlings right now, in which you can first find the smoke and the finish have an extra depth because of it. Absolutely, this will be right up your street. I hope you can get it wherever you are, buddy. You're in Germany, of course. Okay, Scott, we're being a wee bit slow here. The cadence is slow, but it's whiskey, right? And as I said at the outset of the vPub, however long it takes, it takes. VIP pour. I'm going to reach out to something. Honestly, I think the VIP pour would probably be this for me, but I'm more curious. I'll pour another bottle of your stuff while you tell me what your VIP pour would be. VIP is like, not the sense that it's your father-in-law and you're just going to grab a Macallan or something, right? It's just, I'm talking about something who knows. So somebody there, you've got a whiskey geek or a whiskey lover, somebody that's passionate with you, and you're going to pour them something that's quite a treat, something that you can both enjoy and just get your geek on together. That kind of VIP rather than somebody you're trying to impress, if that makes sense.
So this, of all of the categories, was the hardest one for me to pick because I love weird stuff. I love buying weird stuff. I'm going to talk about 3 different bottles, but I'm going to pour from one. So the first one I'm going to talk about was the very first whiskey that I bought at auction. And I dare say that very few people in the chat tonight will have even seen this bottle.
No, I have not seen that bottle. That looks like is that a bizarre optical?
Yeah. So this is called 80-20. And what the story of this whiskey is that 80% of this is 21-year-old Glenmorangie that was sent for bottling, but something went wrong, and 20% of another younger whiskey was added to it by mistake. And and from what I've read, I believe it to be Glen Murray. It was at the time when they were affiliated.
Yes.
And it was sold to a bottler, a Douglas McNiven, and bottled 40% ABV. I've not even opened it yet. I just think it's a really cool thing. And one day I will eventually have someone at the house that'll think this is cool and we'll open it. But it's almost like a predecessor to Ardbeg when they did Serendipity.
Serendipity is exactly what I was thinking about. And interestingly, within the same company as well, whoever looks after their bottling is a little bit slapdash, right? Because there was also a Glenmorangie that went. I mean, that's Glenmorangie, the one that you have there.
Yeah.
But you know, this has happened quite a few times, and fortunately, whiskey does tend to mix quite well. Especially if you leave it for a bit of time. So have you tasted that thing then?
No. I bought it, and I've never had the right person in the room to taste it with. It's not something I want to try by myself. It's something I want to have a conversation about. So, but yeah, no, I wish those stories of things going wrong when it came to bottling was as rare as this release would suggest, but it happens more often than you would think. The second thing that I'll talk about, but not pour tonight because I know what I've made my decision. This was given to me very nicely by Connell Mackenzie. This is a 1-year-old Ardnamurchan from the distillery, PX/Oloroso Octave, 53.1%, 165 bottles. Just an absolutely ridiculous thing. 1-year-old, but so much flavor. So again, this is another great thing for when there's other whiskey geeks kicking about to just go, I've got something that you're going to enjoy.
I recognize this is before they had their fancy bottle design. This is way back. And, you know, I don't know, the first time I bumped into Connell would have been at one of these kind of smaller events when Connell was really going out and pounding pavements to sell what Ardnamurchan was, right? They hardly need to do that now, right? People are loving the product. But I remember him letting us try, and it was, I think the spirits that we tried were octave matured, very, very young, certainly not whiskey, but already resplendent, right? Really quite dense and flavorful, exciting to be able to try.
Yeah, I remember the first time I tried, even when they had the black bottles with the kind of spirit in it.
With the see-through blade,
and was very excited by that. And then it just happened that one day during COVID, I think we were doing a virtual tasting with the malt room. I think it was a whiskey and donuts tasting, and we both just happened to be dropping off stock at the same time and did a wee bottle swap. And I got about half a bottle of that, and I've since made my way through it. But what I'm going to try tonight is the reason I'm going to open this one is because the 80-20, you're never going to find it. The Ardnamurchan, things like that are going to be harder and harder to find. But the bottle that I'm going to drink from tonight, this company is releasing whiskey. And people drinking tonight will be able to find, maybe not this one particularly, but they'll be able to find whiskies from this company. And every time you see that little brown dog, you're getting gold. Every single drop of liquid, whether it's gin, cognac, rum, whiskey that I've had from Little Brown Dog has been absolutely unbelievable. What I've got tonight is the Litten Brun Hund, the Macmira 2008, at 49.8.
So Little Brown Dog in Swedish, right?
Yeah. And this was just a little bit of a bottle given to me by Rachel and Jen from the Grail in Doon after I did a tasting last year.
Yep.
And I was just blown away. It's my style of whiskey. It's tropical, it's fruity. And in terms of that, something to share with a geek, it's an indie bottling. It's a Swedish whiskey. It's got all the things going on about it. You get to tell the story of Andrew and the guys up at Little Brown Dog. Every drop of liquid that these guys are producing is unbelievable. It's in 50 CLs. I don't mind that because it's so limited, and they're actually managing to bring this to market at really, really good pricing.
Well, some of the more recent Little Brown Dogs have been 70 CL as well, I believe. Graham Fraser was in the chat tonight. He's just mentioned that he was at Good Spirits Company tonight with Andrew, I think, hosting a Little Brown Dog tasting. Probably enjoyed himself very, very much out there. But, I mean, as you say, maybe not that particular Macmira bottling, but there's more and more products coming from them as well. They tend to not hang around. They tend to be well celebrated. They're very highly spoken of as well.
Yeah.
Terrific stuff. I was looking for, I don't have any, but I was looking for a very specific Tomatin bottle, and I hope that I had a wee bit left, but it's long gone. I was looking for your distillery PX.
Right.
You'll remember why back in the day that, and there's no, it's no mistake that I'm pouring it from this glass as well, right?
Of course.
It's Scotch Test Dummies glass. So this is obviously in tribute to Scott and Bart. They were the first guys to get you on way back in, I don't remember what year it was, 2016 or 2017.
Yeah.
It was the two Scots along with Scott and Bart, so there was three Scots that night famously. But they had been talking about doing this blind challenge where they were going to get all these sherried whiskies together and double blind taste them all. And there's this whiskey that just kept beating everything. They just kept making it through all the brackets, got into the final, and it won. And it was a Tomatin. It was the PX Tomatin. I don't have the PX, but I do have a distillery pour of your Oloroso here. And I think no, this is May 2017. This must be a gift from somebody. I think this is actually a gift. Actually, I know it's a gift from Scott and Bart.
Oh, really?
So, yeah. So they sent this. They got this sent down to me from the distillery. I remember now, 17th of May, but I've only opened it in recent times.
Yeah.
But this is the opposite of the Cù Bòcan. This is there's a good age on this. This is a 2005 distillate, so it's 12 years old. But this is all about the cask, this one.
Yeah.
This is the Tomatin's fighting to come through this.
So what I always say about this cask as well, And the reason that it exists as part of the bottle your own thing is everything that we do as part of our tour is to show you how we make our whiskey. So with a cask like this, we're showing you one of the components in some of our recipes. The way I like to sum up that whiskey is it is a fantastic sherry matured whiskey, but it is not a great tomatin because, you know, it could be any spirit in there. It's so heavy on the Oloroso. If you are a fan of sherry bombs, this is my definition of a sherry bomb because it obliterates the distillery character.
Well, I mean, you say obliterate. I am still drinking whiskey, and it's very much. Right. I'm still fully aware that I'm drinking whiskey. There are some times that, you know, the sherry can be so heavy that you almost recommend to the person just to buy a bottle of sherry, you know, and probably they'll enjoy it. But this is the whiskey is still part of the equation here, but it's very much a cask story. You're absolutely right. But you could pour this for somebody, whether it's a VIP, whether it's even this would fit as a decadent pour as well. Yeah. You could give it to somebody. I know I could give this to the likes of Gregor or something, and they would sit and purr like a whiskey-filled kitten with this exact style of whiskey. The ABV is up there as well, helping things along, 55.4%. So it's not cloying. It's still quite vibrant and communicative. You know, there's bite to it. It's really, and look at the color of it. I mean, I don't know if anybody can appreciate just how dark that is on the camera, right? It's difficult. You can't see through it. Yeah. Super, super dark. For somebody who says, don't read into color too much. Pale whiskies can be fantastic. But when the color is dark, we can celebrate it if we know it's natural, Scott.
Yeah, so, you almost need a fork and knife to cut through that one.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is a very, very powerful mood dram. If you're in the mood for something like this, it's really fruity. I think this has benefited hugely from being open for a while as well, I have to say. You know, when you're in the mood for something like this, there's not much else you can pour. I'll say that. So there is a lot of kind of snobbery out there that happens, and I understand it and I suffer from it myself. If it's cask-led, if it's a cask story, it's all about the cask. However, it still makes a bloody good drink. Yeah. And for a lot of people, the cask flavors are what brings them into whiskey in the first place. And it might be where they want to dwell, and who are we to deny them? And sometimes, mood and moment permitting, sometimes I want a cask story whiskey. There's nothing wrong with it, right? Absolutely nothing wrong with it. Great stuff. So there's one more left to go through. And I think this could also be that as well, Scott. I'm asking you, this is a difficult one because it's probably maybe one of the most subjective, I don't know, but we've touched on it a couple of times throughout our conversation tonight about analysing whiskey and just drinking whiskey. What I'm actually trying to get when I talk about the attention grabber is a whiskey that will not tolerate you ignoring it. Like every sip, it's going to be grabbing your attention. I bet you that Springbank rum cask would be a perfect example as well. You know, it's just one of those. I'm thinking about Glengoyne's Teapot Dram. I'm thinking about, you know, your distillery pours. I'm thinking about when everything's dialed up to 11, right? Everything is just kind of brutal. The whiskey will not let you just sip it and relax. You can't sometimes focus on your conversation or what's been shown on TV. Yeah. You know exactly the type of drams I'm talking about, right? Everyone that's just going, every sip is going to be like, listen to me. Yeah. Is that tough for you to pick for?
It's not tough. I mean, I think that, like you say, the Springbank could have easily fit the bill for that tonight. I think the Cù Bòcan 15-year-old could have fit the bill tonight. And actually, what I'm going with is something that is not a million miles away from it in terms of flavor profile. Okay. And it's a bottle kill for me tonight. So I've opened.
Oh, we're getting everything. We're getting uncorkings and we're getting bottle kills as well. Terrific.
So there's really not a lot of this left, so you can see.
Oh, I know what that is.
All right.
Don't hold it up yet. Just in case I can do a snap with you. Hang on. Oh no, it's not. It's not the same bottle. I'm just going to put that to the side. I looked at the back label. I thought it's not. I thought it was the same. Let me see what you have.
So this is the Macri Moor Fingals Cut, which was the visitor centre exclusive for Lag opening, but was available to purchase online.
Because of COVID.
Because of COVID.
Yes.
Yeah. So heavily peated Arran, sherry cask, cask strength of 54.4%. In terms of a whiskey that will not let you ignore it, I don't think you could find.
I have it. I have it. It was the one I thought when I saw the colours of the bottle was the Old Ballad Prune 15, right? And because of our discussion over the Cù Bòcan 15, I thought that you might have. But that Fingals Cut, I've put all my Arran bottles here because Arran was my producer of the year for 2022. Yeah. But I think the Fingals Cut, being a Macri Moor, is still over on the shelf because I still have some of that left. I bought it based on Andy Bell raving about it on, I think it was on a vPub that when he was raving about it.
Yeah, so during the pandemic, myself and some pals got together and bought a whole host of bottles from Arran, and Andy was kind enough to jump on and kind of talk us through them. I wouldn't say it was necessarily a tasting. He just became one of the guys in the chat for the night. And this was the one for me that it was the last dram of the evening, and blew me away by not only that, this was, I think at the time, £59, and I think it might still be. You know, you're getting so much whiskey for your money there. We don't know how old it is. I don't care how old it is. It's an incredible whiskey.
And this is their peated malt.
Peated.
So this is before Lag was ever in production.
Yeah.
That's what that. And specifically, that one was a specific edition because of the sherry cask maturation, right?
Yeah. So I think when Lag's Visitor Centre opened, they did 2 Fingals Cut. One was bourbon matured and one was sherry matured. And we opted for the sherry matured. And as I mentioned to you earlier on, I'm not the biggest fan of sherry casks because I find they just go too sweet.
But peat and sherry.
Peat and sherry is a different beast altogether.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Terrific
stuff.
stuff.
Unbelievable. Yeah.
Terrific. Like, I wonder. I'll let you sip on that just to see. I'd love to drink it with you if I've still got it. I'm embarrassed to say that I think it's there, but the amount of time I would take to dig and get to it. If I find it, I'll take a wee picture of it and I'll have a wee post live stream. It's very unprofessional. I'll love you to leave the chair empty there as I go off raking and look for bottles. But as I said at the outlet, it shows that we didn't rehearse this. You're just going to bring along whatever bottles you like, and I don't mind. So that is your attention grabber. Like, it's a pretty good one too.
It's like cola cubes, frazzles. It's just, there's so much happening here that you could try 100 whiskies and never try these flavors, and that's what makes it a standout.
Cola cubes and bacon frazzles.
Right.
You just keep doing the tasting notes, Scott. I'm going to go and find that bottle.
He's confident he's got one. I know to avoid dead air. It's an incredible whiskey. I believe it's still available to purchase online from Arran's website. I could be wrong, and I'm not trying to land them in any trouble there, but if you can get your hands on a bottle of this, it's unbelievable.
I needed the torch.
He's got it.
But I found it, and I'm a wee bit annoyed about how little there is left in the bottom of it as well. I thought I had a lot more.
That was the one thing about the dark glasses. I couldn't quite tell how much was left in it, so I had to pour it out ahead of tonight to make sure I had a glass's worth.
My last clean glass of the night as well. So here we go. Oh no, I've got a fair amount. It's difficult to tell in the.
Aye.
And it'll be the same batch, right?
I think there was only one, yeah.
54.4.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the same thing.
Well, here's to grabbing attention, fella. Cheers.
Cheers.
Oh, Okay, the savoury thing I definitely get, yep. The bacon frazzles that you're talking about. Maybe the cola cubes will taste. Oh, it's just that peat and sherry is just so good at bringing that this is like a ham roast or something. It's been doused in maple syrup but it's smoked ham, of course it is. It's much thicker than I remember. Obviously, it's been in an open bottle for a while as well, this one too. What an incredible thing to discover. And it was right at the back of the shelf. I did need the torch to shine in and find it. That's terrific. I'm glad I found it. I'm glad I went and digging for it. Brilliant.
It's an incredible thing.
Listen, I think in order to summarize, I hope that anybody that's spent any amount of time sitting with us tonight, you're not getting off the hook yet. There is still a quiz. And like I say, there's pressure on you to do very, very well. Hope that anybody has spent any time can pick up that, and I appreciate this more than anyone, Scott. You have been traveling for weeks on end. Even when you're at home domestically, you're doing events, you're constantly talking about whiskey. And I often worry that folk that do what you do can sometimes tire a wee bit and get a wee bit whiskey fatigued. It's inevitable. It happens to me occasionally. So, but what's fun is that I reach out to you and just suggest, would you be? And you're just immediately like, yes. It's clear that you get a buzz out of this. And it's not another opportunity for you to sell the product. It's another opportunity for you to revel in what the product actually is. And it comes across in not just what you say, but in the context of how you say it and the way that you're able to say and share things. And I hope that everybody picks that up. I love it. I love talking to you. I could talk to you for hours on end. And it's a privilege for me to have had you on here tonight to go through the products that you enjoy and what you like to drink as well. I'll jump into the chat. I hope that everybody's enjoyed it. Please, I know that everybody's going to start bailing, but it is a very, very generous quiz tonight because I have a guest. I'm pointing the quiz very much towards my guest. And I think that there's a good chance that everybody's going to enjoy the feeling that I got to experience last week when I hit my first ever 10 on the quiz. However, it did require Menno to make a mistake and have 11 questions in order for me to manage it. But I was taking it. I took it to the bank and I loved it. Jimmy Legge saying, how do you know you have too much whiskey? He's being sarcastic because I can't find the bottles. And even now that it's organised into kind of rough sections, I still struggle to find things. Jimmy, you're absolutely right. Rob Smith, I cracked open the Springbank 15. You star, Rob. Well done to you, buddy. I hope that it's paying you back and you're enjoying it. And Graham Fraser's saying, I know that Scott means what Scott means about sherry casks, often overpowering the distillate. How does he feel about wine cask maturation? How do you feel about wine cask? Ask Graham Fraser.
So, from my experience of working with wine casks, you can get some incredible whiskies using wine casks, but the margin for error is so slight. So, say for example, a refill cask. That cask will be in its prime for a very, very long time. Yes. With a wine cask, you can sometimes find yourself with a wine cask, it tastes brilliant for a month and then it's overpowered. You know, they can overcook very quickly and they can take a long, long time to get to a good place. So we use wine casks. We use a huge variety of different casks. They just require more attention. And I think a lot of the time, you know, there are a lot of people that just don't like wine casks. That's fine. There's a lot of people that don't like bourbon casks. There's a lot of people that don't like peat, you know. So there's going to be that out there. But I think if the person responsible for the cask is aware that these casks have such a short window of being perfect, and you have the equipment there to be able to say, it's time to get it out of the cask, get it into an ABC now, then you can get some great whiskey.
Yeah. I think I agree, and it's quite interesting to consider it in kind of optimal point and realise that is actually an issue because it's one of the luxuries that we have of those refill casks that they can be left, and often, you know, the longer that you leave a refill cask, the better it can become. And but these super active casks as well, and wine casks, the wine casks that you're dealing with, are they usually about similar size, 220 litres, that order?
They're always going to be that kind of barrique size.
Yeah,
Most of what we've used so far has come from the continent, France, Italy, Spain. We've not yet branched out to look at like California or things like that. Further afield, you've got the concern of, spoilage on the way to the distillery.
Shipping, yeah.
And if they've not spoiled, how much sulfur has been used to stop that from happening? There's ozoning going on now. We're not entirely sure how that's going to work. So lots of things to consider. But if you're dealing with, first of all, I think with wine casks, what's really important to them is the quality of wood. If you're dealing with really nice French oak red wine casks, you can get some great whiskey out of them.
Well, it's interesting as well, if they are a similar size, 220, 225 litre type size, then the liquid to wood ratio means that window you're talking about can be, whereas if it's a 550, 600 litres, you've maybe got, it widens that window a little bit, and the bigger the port pipes and the big sherry butts and things like that. But in the smaller casks, I guess it does require a lot of man hours or warehousing hours in order to stay on top of the.
And I think what's so important with casks like that, when it comes to finishing in particular, and this is something that's not talked about enough, is what you're putting into them. Quite often we talk about when's the right time to take the whiskey out and stuff, but you've got to have a really clear idea of what spirit needs to go into that cask before you're going to have it. So for us, typically, if we want to release something at 12 years old in a wine cask, you're probably looking at a 9-year-old refill cask going in to give you a good footing.
Yeah.
So that clear idea of the spirit going in is important.
So a spirit that's already established itself before you're even showing it to that really, really powerful active cask. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Chris Pollock is saying Fingal's cut sherry cask for $49.99. And sorry, that jumped, Chris. I'll try and grab it back. There it is. $49.99 in the Aaron web shop. This is 50 quid.
This might have to become a Permashelf itself.
Yeah, that's insane. Malt Brother Ray saying 2 bottle kills for the Macri Moore Fingal's cut sherry cask at the same time. Let's go for it, Malt Brother Ray. And Jimmy Legg is saying he doesn't look stressed. No, I've never seen Scott Adamson looking stressed ever. Whiskey and Wine Trails Thomas saying big hand to Scott for agreeing to join us tonight. Thanks from all of us. You've never turned us down yet, buddy, so long may it continue. No. Graham Fraser is saying I recently shared Scott's view on whiskey finishing. Sorry, I certainly share Scott's view on whiskey finishing. I find it's something you need to sample before buying, but when it's done, when it's good, wow, absolutely. So he's talking about the finishing casks. And Savar from Iceland, good to see you, buddy. Just arrived. How is this fine lad? I hope he's doing very well, Savar. I hope you're doing very well too. Savar is from Iceland. Time for a dram. Gregor is in. Thanks, Scott, from me for nothing in particular and everything all at the same time. And Peter Lee is saying, looks like I need to try more tomatin. I've had very little of that up to now. Something you need to fix, buddy. Chris Bollock is saying, add VAT. Okay, so the $49.99, so it's going to be a 60 quid bottle. Great. Yeah. Andrew Pierce is saying that's 60 when you add tax. Okay. And the whiskeyographer is saying it's $59.99 plus £8 delivery. Still, it's not out of order for such a powerful dram, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm loving that whole smoked ham and bacon thing.
It's ridiculous, isn't it? And that's what I was saying. You could try 100 whiskies and think you know whiskey very well, and someone brings this to your house and you'd be like, I've never experienced anything like that before in my life.
Well, that's what's brilliant. Well, especially from Aaron. It's not the style of whiskey that you would typically expect from Aaron, but you forget that they've been making peated whiskey for quite a while.
Yeah.
Ryan McLeave is asking if you'll be at Glasgow Whiskey Festival in November. I've not seen you there in a wee while.
I honestly don't know where I'm going to be. So I've recently just finished my first half of the year travel. I need to sit down with all the sales guys, all the marketing guys, and say, where do you want me for the second half of the year? And we'll go from there. I'd love to be there if I'm around. I'd love to go. It's one of the better shows of the year. My favourite thing about Glasgow Whiskey Festival is the second session, where you know that everyone's been in the pub watching the football for 2 hours beforehand. An absolute rammy. It's fantastic.
Well, there's a diplomatic statement. My favourite thing. Certainly entertaining. One of the reasons that we don't go to the second session, but the biggest reason is if we talk about it being about the people, we go to the first session, we get dinner together, and we all go out. We usually end up at the Bon Accord, and then all the VIP guys like you pile in at later in the night. It gets really quite busy. But usually I host an event on the Sunday, the day after the festival as well, Scott. So let me know if you're in town. I think you'd have a lot of fun.
Will.
You know the blind challenge drill. It's great fun.
Yeah.
Jimmy, like you're saying, that's so true. That's what we're all looking for, something we've not experienced before. Absolutely, Jimmy. It's why we just keep exploring and why we over-accumulate far too many bottles of whiskey. Hoyt is saying, good guest tonight. I enjoy the products. I think I'll skip the super chat this time. Wink, wink. So it was my friend Hoyt that was caught out last week. Buddy, yes, absolutely. Let's get that one fixed first. Graham Fraser is saying, I've tried tomatin since the early 2000s, and it's only since the distillery went into prioritising single malt that it has blossomed. Absolutely. I think we're all finding that. We're all enjoying so much more focus on single malt. Ellswood is saying, thanks to Scott, brutally honest and genuine as ever. Cheers, great vPub. Helen, don't leave too early. Thanks for your kind words. And let's see if we can get this quiz on the go and put a wee bit of pressure on our guest, where every question has a chance of being a tomatiny flavoured question. Let's see how he gets on tonight. It'll be far too easy for him, I'm sure. And Peter is saying Denise will be too after Glasgow Whisky Festival to attend the blind challenge. Good stuff. And Andrew is saying, talking about Arran and Little Brown Dog, the latest release is an Arran made from unpeated malt, but from the first distillation after a peated run, using peated low wines and faints. Interesting. So that is super interesting. I was involved in another discussion from another distillery actually, and we're trying to work out why something was not peated, and it's for that very reason, because it has to flush through, it has to run through, and sometimes it takes a while for it to start to sing, and we
call it the shoulders.
Yeah,
you've got the shoulder going in and the shoulder coming out. For your production.
Yep.
But that level of detail from Little Brown Dog, that's got Andrew Smith written all
over it. Yeah, absolutely. Gab's Dram is saying, great night, thanks to Scott. Andrew Smith was actually at Arran when I was at Arran, being hosted by Andy Bell. I didn't know him at the time, and I was with my family. We never got a chance to get introduced, but I'm sure it'll happen at some point in the future. Buddy, stay for the quiz. I know it's very late now. It's just turned midnight, the witching hour. Let's put the wheels on the quiz and see how you got on, buddy. All right. Listen, everybody, you know what the drill is. I'm sure most of you do. It's always multiple choice. It's always just for fun. The pass mark is usually 5. The first 5 questions are usually quite gentle and easy, and then it gets a wee bit harder. Look out for the banana skins. Look out for the inevitable ass-hack question that we always save to the end. I think I've been fairly fair to you tonight, and I'm sure I predict a few of you are in with a chance of getting a 10 out of 10 tonight. You don't need to share the score. It's always optional. Good luck, Scott. Question 1. The Lagavulin Fischel release, which was recently announced. The Lagavulin Fischel release was recently announced. Which of these is it? Is it A, a 14-year-old? Is it B, £220 per bottle? Or is it C, a 58.4% ABV with an Armagnac finish? Don't panic. Keep your hair on. Wonderful vPub, Roy, says Ben, Whiskey with Molly. I noticed your comment earlier that you've just come home late from work, buddy. I hope you're not too tired, and I hope you're up for a wee quiz at the end. I know you enjoy a quiz. Jaime, not Jamie, is saying, Scott, please continue to produce quality, affordable whiskies. I have 6 tomatin bottles and I love them all. 14 Port is my number 1. There you go. Somebody else who also loves it. Rick Johnson is saying, Aquavita, I haven't gotten any quiz questions wrong tonight. Terrific stuff. Love the optimism. What are we going for, Scott? 14-year-old, £220, or is it an Armagnac finish?
I'm going £220.
All of those are correct.
Oh, wow.
The official release this year is a 14-year-old 58.4 with an Armagnac finish. I'm not too excited by that, but any excitement I have is immediately snuffed out by the price. I didn't put that up for it to have a whinge. I put it up there so that everybody could have a point to start the quiz tonight. Everybody starts the quiz with a point. There you go. Question 2. Cù Bòcan translates from Gaelic to English more or less as what? Cù Bòcan means A, a shadow creature. Cù Bòcan means B, a ghost dug. Or C, a smoke spirit. What does Cù Bòcan mean? Shadowy creature, ghost dog, or smoke spirit? If you get this wrong, fella, I think you'd get your jotters come Friday morning, right?
They certainly won't let me make it anymore, that's for sure.
That's right. Ebhead is saying we know this. It's early in the quiz, buddy. It's early in the quiz. So what does Cù Bòcan more or less mean, Scott?
Cù means dog and Bòcan means spirit or ghost. So it's ghost dog E.
Ghost dog. 2 for 2 for Scott. Question 3. According to Google Maps, which of these distilleries is closest to the city of Inverness by road? So it's not by as the crow flies, as it often is in the vPub quiz at the end. This is if you're driving, Google Maps style. Is it A, Tomatin is closest to Inverness? B, Royal Bracla and Glenord are equidistant? Or is it C, Tomatin, Bracla and Ord are all equidistant? According to Google Maps, which of these distilleries is closest to the city of Inverness by road? Now, I know you're thinking there's a banana skin here, Roy. This looks like it should be an asshat. This is an awful question, especially for people who don't live in or around Inverness or even in Scotland. But bear with me. Consider. What would you answer here, Scott?
I would say Tomatin. And the reason I would say Tomatin is it's the only one of these distilleries in Inverness-shire. However, I know how close the other two are. It could be C. It could be C. My sister lives next to Bracla. My colleague lives next to Glenord. It could be C, but I'm going to go with Tomatin. A.
If it's C, Tomatin, Bracla and Ord are all equidistant, that means that all are correct, which is absolutely right.
Fair enough.
So within, depending on where you choose as the centre of Inverness, there's less than half a mile between the three distilleries. Quite incredible. But you're absolutely spot on that if you were driving, the time it would take, because of the A9, as of course Tomatin is the nearest, the quickest. The roads are a wee bit less. It's not a dual carriageway, for example, for the other two. But they are all within literally a couple of 100 yards of each other, equidistant in terms of distance. I remember asking you the question when I was up there. I said, you must be the distillery closest to Inverness. And I remember you weren't actually 100% sure.
Aye.
But as
it still wasn't when you asked me tonight.
Yeah, that's right. Of course, it wasn't an option tonight, but we now have Ullivest from the city centre, right?
True.
So they are slap bang in the middle of Inverness now.
Yeah.
Question 3 for 3, Scott. Well done. Question 4. Which of these blends are from the same portfolio of brands as Tomatin and Cù Bòcan? Again, this is a shoe-in for Scott. Is it A, the Antiquary, B, the Hanky Bannister, or C, Label 5? Antiquary, Hanky Bannister, Label 5. Rob Smith is saying, I need to move to Inverness. Rob, Inverness is probably, I mean, I love Glasgow. I absolutely do love Glasgow. But as towns go, Inverness is up there. It's just a gorgeous, gorgeous place. I was with Graham Young earlier this week, and he'd just been to Inverness, and he described it as utterly charming.
Yeah.
It's one of those towns it's a big town. It's got everything that you need, but it still manages to retain that sense of Highlandy remoteness, you know?
Yeah. There was a brilliant song years ago, and one of the lines in it was, Inverness, you're trying to be a city, but you're barely a town, you know? And that's what it is. It's a big town. It's not a small city. It's a big town, and it's got that feel about it. But what's really cool about it is there's so much going on. There's so much food, drink, sport, art, music. It's a really cool place to be.
And all the while, it still manages to retain a prettiness. I think the river
Yeah.
does it a lot of favours, right?
Yeah.
And I think just being that kind of central hub for the Highlands, it does make it kind of magical.
Yeah.
Perhaps I should retire to Inverness, suggests Jimmy Legg. I think it would be easy to convince you to do such a thing. Hope you get a chance to visit it while you're here, big guy. What is it? Is it antiquary, Hanky Bannister, or Label 5, Scott?
It's antiquary. Antiquary.
Absolutely, 4 for 4 for Scott. Anybody that answered A, as I can see, the vast majority of you did. Sugar Kitty, good to see you in answering A as well. Almost everybody else getting absolutely right. Amazing the knowledge that, I mean, these people are not blends people, and yet they know their stuff. Question 5, we're looking at an image. Of course, question 5 is always a picture. Scott is focusing intently. I'm going to ask you what we're looking at here. Are we looking at A, Tomatin, B, Glenfarclas, C, Tom and Till? Now, given Scott's reaction to that image, this is clearly a 50-50 now, right?
We've never looked that good.
It's very pretty, right? So are we looking at A, Tomatin, B, Glenfarclas, or C, Tom and Till?
It's very clean.
Very shiny, very clean. There are visitors there. I can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 stills. I don't know how much that helps anyone, but everyone's answering away. Okay. What's Scott from Tomatin going to go for here?
Glenfarclas.
You think we're looking at Glenfarclas? Absolutely right. And just in case I'm not making it easy enough, if your screen is big enough just to make out on the right-hand still there, there's a ever so slight logo you can see appearing. I don't know if you can see it, but there is a wee Glenfarclas logo there. That's a picture sent in by Graham Fraser. Thank you very much, Graham. I'm running out of pictures now. I need some more, buddy. Question 6, going to start to get a wee bit trickier now. In 1956, Tomatin were operating with only 2 stills. Just 18 years later, in 1974, they had increased to how many? How many did they end up with in 74? A, 13 stills. B, 17 stills. C, 23 stills. Scott's often talked about Tomatin in the context of it's almost mapped the fortunes of Scotch whisky's history over the years, despite only being operating since, I think, 1897, were you, Tomatin?
Yeah, 1897.
And immediately closed down, and in 1906 brought back to life in 1909. So immediately the turn of the century, the Pattison crash and the troubles that they went through. And it's kind of followed the ups and downs of Scotch whisky all the while. It's remarkably resilient, Scott. Remarkably resilient. It's amazing to see what it's doing now. Do you feel confident about this one?
Yeah, I mean, I will touch on that. You said remarkably resilient. I'm sure if you were there in 1906 or 1984, you would think it was remarkably unlucky. But
absolutely, absolutely, that's
I'm
true.
confident
That's
with this.
Yep.
I'm confident with the answer to this one.
It's incredible how it was able to bounce back, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I have to say, we're also very grateful to your Japanese owners that they're letting you have such free reign to develop your own products and international products as a single malt, right? There are other owners out there that do not allow such freedoms.
Yeah. I mean, the story there, very, very briefly, is they bought Tomatin because they were our biggest customer. They bought the distillery as a customer, not with the intention of being the operator or the owner.
The profiteers, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
So that's what's helped us for so long.
Okay, in 18 years, Tomatin grew from 2 to how many stills, Scott?
23.
Incredible, right?
Yeah.
Incredible. That's more than a still a year.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
My favorite thing about that is it went from 2 to 4 to 8 to 11 to 23. So you would have come in one day after a summer shutdown and it was bigger than twice it had been the week before. Crazy.
Gabriel Welding is complaining, this whole quiz is ruining my planned I Am a Distillery game. So we play a game on the Dramface podcast called I Am a Distillery. I don't know if you know, but it's 10 questions and it's the most obscure to the most obvious.
Right.
And everybody playing along has to shout their one chance of guessing. And once they've put their bid in, they have to be quiet, and it's tough. So Gabriel Welding was obviously thinking about doing a tomatin-based one. So I'm stealing all his thunder. Sorry, buddy. I hope
Gabriel, I'll send you some really obscure stuff.
It's easy to make a hard quiz, Scott. It's too easy. Question 7. At 12 million litres per annum, Tomatin was once the largest malt whisky producer in Scotland. It is now producing much less. In fact, about the same as the theoretical capacity of, this is tricky, there should be an asshat next to this, I'm sure, A, Balblair, B, Loch Lomond, C, Springbank. What I'm hoping is that you can reach into your deep knowledge of the theoretical capacity, the general scale of those 3 distilleries. I am not asking about the general capacity of Tomatin. I'm asking about what they are actually producing today to scale it against the theoretical capacity of those 3 fairly well-known distilleries. So Tomatin's production, more or less, today, is it the same as the capacity of A, Balblair, B, Loch Lomond, or C, Springbank? Getting tricky now, Scott.
Yeah.
I think we have a banana skin here. Should be a banana skin. Why don't you start by telling us how many litres you're producing more or less right now?
So this year, we actually increased production this year. So for the first time in a while, we've had a month or 2 of 24/7 production, taking us to 2.5 million litres this year.
Okay, that is a big jump. That's more.
Yep.
That's more than the information I had, but it's still the closest.
Yeah.
Springbank is currently about 700 or 800,000 litres capacity, but they're producing about half that.
Yeah.
Loch Lomond is about 5 million litres. Pretty decent size, a big scale. Balblair is about 1.8 million litres.
Yeah.
So therefore, the scale is similar to Balblair. So we think of this massive factory, this juggernaut scale plant, this whiskey production universe that exists on the A9 there, and actually, you're actually still 2.5 million litres is impressive. That's a big jump, right? In a very short space of time. But it's nothing. I mean, compared to the 70s when you were the biggest and you were doing 12 million litres.
Yeah.
And most of that, the majority of that today is single malt production, right?
Yeah, so it's hard to say kind of in that sense, but I guess the most telling thing is when I started with the company 11 years ago, 80% of the stock held on site was for blending. And now 80% of the stock that we hold is for the single malts. So I think that's quite telling in and of itself, is just the
and
total
you've only
change
been there, as you've admitted, in 11 years. That's quite a shift, right?
Massive shift. And yeah, so to touch on the capacity, our capacity, if we went hell for leather 24/7, we'd probably hit 5 million a year.
Yep.
But as it stands, we use 10 of the 12 stills. We work 4.5 days a week. And then I think in February, we ran 24/7 this year.
Tell me something else, Scott. What is the fermentation time of Tomatin?
168 hours. It's a full week.
Can we just pause there? 168 hours.
Yeah.
There was a time that we used to speak about fermentation times in, a couple of days, 72 hours maybe at a push, that kind of thing. And then it started to break 100, and 168 hours and surely that's the type of fermentation that you can only achieve in stainless steel washbacks, right? You can't easily do that in wood.
Yeah.
That must be also a fairly recent change, no?
It is a recent change, and do you know what? That's one of the silver linings of COVID, actually. It's one of the good things that came out of that. So I'll go back a little bit. Fermentation as a process of your yeast converting your sugar to alcohol, 48 hours, job done. You've got all
Yes.
the booze you're going to get. What happens after that is the yeast starts to die off, and all of the other bacteria that exist, whether it's on the plant, the barley, the water, they come to life and they create a lot of other reactions. That's why you do it, because those reactions create esters, which create fruit and floral flavors, which are brilliant for whiskey. The reason we've been able to do it is we have 12 washbacks and we run 12 mashes a week. If we had to increase the amount of mashes that we had a week, we would have less capacity by washback. But what happened was, when we went back to work after the very first lockdown, we decided to only let one team back at a time. So we let the brewing team back for a week, and then we let the distilling team back. And
So
then
that forced a natural...
Yeah.
Yeah.
And do you know what's really cool about this? This is really geeky, is this is how whiskey was made up until the end of the Second World War. So one of the things that happened after the Second World War, up until that point in time, your brewing and distilling had to be done separately. You were not allowed to do them at the same time. But following the Second World War, there was a lot of pressure on whiskey to make back revenue for the government. And the law changed to allow you to distill and ferment at the same time. So historically, you would have had week-long fermentations just naturally, because that's the way the law worked. So what we're doing now with this week-long fermentation, it's almost what happened 70 years ago. I think that's a pretty cool thing.
So there you go, folks. In case you're worried that the future of whiskey is not so bright, we are now getting this secondary fermentation thing coming through in Tomatin as well. Fantastic stuff. Can't wait to see what it produces. That's a nice wee Easter egg for those that decided to stay towards the end. Fantastic. So you're still on it. You've not slipped yet, Scott. Still on
good so far.
Tomatin. Tomatin was the first Scotch malt distillery to install what? A spirit safe. B, a full Lauter mash tun. C, a Charles C. Doig pagoda kiln ventilator. Tomatin was the first to either implement a spirit safe, a full Lauter mash tun, or a pagoda ventilator. Is that really tongue-in-cheek? What does the C stand for in Charles C. Doig? I bet you know, don't you?
I don't. No. I've heard it before, but I can't remember.
Yeah, it's one of those ones that you go, oh, what does the C stand for? You're just waiting for it to come up. It's Cree. Charles Cree Doig, yeah.
Right, Charles Cree.
Incredible. I'm not leading anyone there. I hope you just go on your own. Roy loves a pagoda. I do. I love an appropriate pagoda. I love a pagoda that's actually always been there.
Yeah.
There's so many pagodas that are just like, oh, it's a distillery, we have to plop a pagoda on top. I think we hit peak pagoda in 1995 when they built Arran.
I do love that phrase. I love an appropriate pagoda. Like that, we've got pagoda appropriation going on across the industry.
Right. Was it genuinely used as a ventilator at one point? Yes, it gets to stay. But there's lots, Ardnahoe's plonked a pagoda on top of their visitor centre and things. It does look good. It does look stylish. Right. Tom Elmer was saying, just out of curiosity, does selling as a malt by the distillery pay more than selling wholesale for a blend? Well, long term, it probably does, but it's the time that it takes to get the money back, I suppose, right?
Yeah. And one of the big things that happened for us over the last 20 years is we've had to buy back a lot of the stock that we had originally sold for blending. So,
wow.
Yeah. So a lot of the older stock that we have, it's always been on site, but for a period of time, it's been owned by blenders.
Owned by other people.
And we've repatriated it.
Fantastic. That's a very healthy thing to have to do. Absolutely. Scott, tell us, what was first employed at Tomatin?
First employed at Tomatin was a biomass boiler, but also a full Lauter mash tun.
Biomass boiler as well. Well, oops. Absolutely. And I don't know, I'm not really sure about the difference between semi-lauter and full lauter, but I believe that it's full lauter can lead to clearer worts because it lifts the bed of grain rather than just
it can
stirring
go
it
up
up.
and down. That's it. Simply.
Yeah.
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 It came from the German brewing industry, and it was all about efficiency.
Perfect. When was that, Scott? When did that happen? Do you know?
It was the 1960s. I'd be lying if I said I know the exact date. Graham Unson knows. I think Graham could tell you what time they turned it on for the first time. That's his little tidbit of information. He loves
Well,
that.
that in itself is interesting that it's far back as the 60s. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
It was
it
early.
would have been cast iron probably before then, right?
So what it was the Lauter system was put into the old mash casing.
Oh,
So the
wow.
mash tun itself never changed, and that's why. So the mash tun that you can go inside at Tomatin is the original cast iron casing, and it's so much deeper than a modern Lauter mash tun would be because it used to have to house the big rakes and churning
Got
system.
you. Got you. That's amazing. I wish I'd appreciated that when I was sitting in there
Inside it,
broadcasting from it.
behind you.
Yeah. Graham Fraser is saying, is that the display, mash tun on display? Absolutely, Graham. That's exactly it. Spot on. Only two more to go. What is the oldest Cù Bòcan vintage released to date? Now, this would have been a bit of a banana skin if it weren't for, if you've been paying attention earlier. Is it A, a 1988 vintage, B, a 1999 vintage, or C, a 2007 vintage? What's the oldest Cù Bòcan vintage released to date? Terrific stuff. The scoring is very strong tonight. Graham Fraser on full marks. Whiskey Myth, Wally Gregg's Whiskey Guide. Kyle Taylor all on a 7 out of 8. Jimmy Legg joining him on a 7 out of 8. Bob Weiser is on a 4 out of 8. One more to get, Bob, for your pass mark. Andrew Peers on 5 out of 8. Rob Smith on 6. I'm looking for the 8s. Mike Molasses is on an 8 along with Graham Fraser. Ebhead, Rolfie is on 8. Getting excited, Rolfie. Rick Johnson is celebrating a pass mark. So we've got at least three people on an 8 out of 8 so far. Jimmy is saying 8 out of 9. What about this one, buddy? What is the oldest Cù Bòcan release? We mentioned it earlier.
1988.
Yeah, 1988, which is one of the old Tomatin, as we discovered this evening. I think it was Roland was asking about it.
Yeah.
Aged in an ex-Isla cask. Fantastic. 9 out of 9 for Scott. The ass hat can kill us all, however, and that's what's to come. There are 11 questions tonight, correct, says Rob Smith. No, that's a Menno quiz. That's definitely Menno had 2 question 3s last week by pure accident, which I was so grateful of because I was able to
if it was anybody else, I would accept that it was an accident. But being that it was Menno, I don't know that it was necessarily an accident.
Brutal. Yeah.
Well,
I was very grateful to him. James Morgan is saying, I thought the 70s casks were often referred to, or at least for the staff, at Tomatin. Well, when Graham Unson was on, he talked about his 1976, was it?
Yeah.
Well, not kill us, Aquavite, says Jimmy Legg. You're absolutely right. It maybe just takes the wind out you a wee bit. Let's just go into the ass hat at the end. Of course, it's an ass hat. There's a few of you, I hope, still managing to scrape through on a 9 out of 9. Gabriel Welding is also there as well. So there's a few in a good place for a 10 out of 10. Rolfie, are you hanging on in there? 9 out of 9. He's shaking now. Rolfie's in there. Fantastic. Let's see what the ass hat holds. Question 10. More distilleries begin with the letter G than any other, but how many? About the same as A, operating Diageo distilleries, B, operating Speyside distilleries, or C, operating mainland Highland distilleries. Yes, the ass hat, you have to know the answer to 2 things in order to answer it, and even then, you're probably guessing on both most of the time. There are a lot of G distilleries, many of them beginning with Glen, funnily enough. But how many are there? About the same as there are Diageo-owned operating distilleries. B, the same as there are Speyside distilleries. or C, the same amount as mainland Highland distilleries? Scott, you're guessing now.
Let's go Highland. Let's go Highland. That's my guess. I mean, that's a ridiculous question.
Yes, that's the point of the asshat. It is the point of the asshat. Following Scott, Molasses is saying C. Rolfie is saying C. I'm looking for Graham Fraser. Who else was his? Gabriel Welding is suggesting A. Gabriel. I can't see Graham Fraser. I can't see him right now.
Graham's gone for
There
A.
he is. Graham is also going A. Okay, I can tell you that there are around 42 operating mainland Highland distilleries, Scott. There are around 49 operating Speyside distilleries. There are around 29 operating Diageo distilleries, and there are 27 G distilleries. And of course, when Glen Luss and the other ones come along, maybe Gart Breck will take, we don't know, but it maybe creep up to being a wee bit more. But the closest, about the same as A, operating Diageo distilleries. So I feel terrible for Rolfie, but I feel amazing for Gabriel Welding and Graham Fraser, because it looks like the two of those guys, we've got some 10 out of 10s to celebrate. It's a bit of a shame the asshat got you, buddy, at the end. It's a wee bit of a shame that you never managed to reach the 10 out of 10 tonight, but you get very close.
That was close enough for me. You
There's
don't want
no
to fly
shame.
too close to the sun. You don't want to fly too close to the sun.
That's right. There's no shame in losing out to the asshat. It's deliberately obnoxious, honestly.
I'm just glad I never got the ghost dog question wrong. That would have been the problem.
That's right. It would have been a difficult sales meeting the next time around. Tommy Elmer is saying, I need a Bronx cheer emoji for you, Aquavite. Yeah, I get it, Tom. 8 out of 10. Well done. Great score on Fernando's saying, give us one more question, please. So Fernando's obviously a 9 out of 9. Open for a bonus. Don't even have a bonus. That could be a new thing in the quiz at the end, a bonus question. Whiskey with Molly is celebrating a 10 out of 10. Well, actually 9 out of 10. But I've had a great night and you're not putting a dampener on it. That's terrific, Ben. Thank you so much, buddy. Ebhead is saying, quiz my ass. That asshat took away my first and perhaps only chance of getting a 10 out of 10, Roy. But he's still laughing. Fantastic stuff. Brilliant, Rolfie. I'm so glad that you could stay up and hang out with us, buddy. And I'm sorry, I will make up to you in the future and you will achieve a 10 out of 10, buddy. Scott, I'm going to raise this wee glass. I've finished my Fingles cut. It was delicious. You're quite right. But I've got in here my Oloroso one that was, I thought it was one I'd poured myself, but no, it was one that was sent to me by Scott and Bart. But regardless, it's a good one to raise a glass at the end. It's always a pleasure to have you here, buddy. In fact, I've worked out that the only time that we're ever going to be able to meet up and actually have time to just sit down and talk about whiskey is if I invite you on the vPub. We get a chance to do it.
I know.
So you're probably, as far as the industry goes, you must be the most visited here. And I can't imagine anybody better for it, buddy. I'm grateful to your bravery at the beginning, and I'm grateful to your friendship even now that you're willing to still step up and do the same thing. I hope you enjoy it. I know that the folk that have joined us tonight very much enjoy it. It's not just what you say, but it's how you say in the context and how you say it. Scott Adamson, stay for the end credits, won't you, please? And if you've got time, just to say goodnight. But thank you, my friend. Until the next time.
Thanks for having me, and thanks everyone for coming along. Cheers.
Sláinte mhath, Scotty. Thank you. Excellent. Superb. Loved it. One of the easiest Thursday nights I've ever had. I absolutely enjoyed hanging out. I hope there was enough interaction for you guys tonight. It's very easy for me when there's a guest on, especially somebody I enjoy speaking to so much, that I ignore you a wee bit. Hopefully I haven't done too much of that tonight. Hopefully I did treat you with a quiz that was achievable, and even the folks that didn't make the 10 out of 10 tonight, like Ben, managed to get a really decent score and at least managed to make a pass mark out of it. I've loved it tonight. Andrew Pears is celebrating being a member of the Barflies for 30 months. Andrew, thank you for your support. A superb vPub. Cheers, Roy and Scott. Thank you to Andrew. I've loved it too. Tommy Elmer is saying good times as always. Barfly, stay safe in Sláinte. Thank you, Tom, up in Alaska. And Dan Thompson is saying thanks as always. Cheers, Roy. Cheers, Scott. Ebed is saying Thanks, Roy and Scott. What a great night and fun conversation. Thank you, Rolfie, and I'm sorry about not quite making the 10 out of 10 tonight. And Gabriel's saying, thanks, Aquavita and Scott, for another lovely evening. Congratulations to you on your 10 out of 10 as well, buddy. Rob Smith is saying, great conversation tonight. Graham Fraser is saying, thanks, Roy and Scott. And Peter Box is saying, great info tonight as well. Terrific stuff. Thanks to you all. I am hoping it is not fully hammered out yet, because Chad and Sarah are still in Scotland right now, but I'm hoping that they're home and settled enough in order for me to welcome them next week, in order for it to be a kind of almost like a decompression session for them, a post Bourbon Channel visiting Scotland on tour. And we can spin it into something that's going to be valuable for everybody traveling to Scotland over the summer. If they're still a bit jet lagged and fuzzy, they might choose to push it out 2 weeks down the line. But currently, Chad and Sarah are scheduled to join me when they return home here next week for an all about visiting Scotland from an outsider's perspective vPub. I hope it's something that might be useful to everyone. This has been a very useful and very delicious and interesting vPub for me tonight. I'm looking forward to welcome you all back here again next week, whatever the topic and subject matter is. Until then, I'm going to raise this glass and remind you all that you're very dearly loved and say thank you and Sláinte mhath. Cheers, everyone.